Shelley. Introductions.
Oh, Shelley Luss, Director of Stakeholder and Community Engagement.
And very important day. Happy birthday, Shelley.
Happy birthday. It is today.
All righty, we will move with the approval of the January 23rd minutes.
Move
I have
forward.
an amendment.
All right, so we have a first by Ms. Debbie, I heard Chair Vic Sanders with a second.
Okay. So,
Oh, I'm sorry.
There wasn't
I
a
didn't hear
motion,
what you
Sheriff,
said.
yeah.
oh, no, I have an amendment.
Oh,
to
okay.
it.
Oh,
Go
okay.
ahead, my apologies.
So in section 4, it's the fourth page at the top, where it says that I inquired about the 650 square feet or smaller, the micro units. I wasn't inquiring as to that being part of affordable housing. I was inquiring as to the other, if those micro units would be part of the other multifamily, not the affordable housing was separate. So I just want to clarify that.
Thank you.
Because I was looking to see if we have additional housing that will be affordable but isn't considered part of the affordable housing
Where is she?
units. That's my correction.
Right here. The size of the square footage mixture.
You good with the correction, Brian?
Yes.
Okay, all right. So now we're entertaining a motion to accept the minutes with that correction.
Move forward.
All right, we have a first by Chair Vic Sanders,
Second.
second by Vice Chair Mathis. All those in favor?
Aye.
One abstain.
All right, so we have one abstain. That's right, it does move forward. Thank you so much. We'll move over to the discussion. Brian?
Thank you, Chair. First, we would like to discuss the job categories. This was information that had been requested by the committee as it related to the jobs that were going to be created on the site. And to explain some of this, I would like to ask Mr. Andrew Frazier to join us from Best Source Consulting.
Good afternoon, Chair Matthews, Vice Chair Mathis, and the rest of the committee. Thank you, Brian, for the introduction. As you can imagine, there is a lot of data to sort through to get to the bottom of your question, Ms. Matthews. So I will do my best to try to make sure that question is answered. In going through the types of jobs that they created, you're looking at everything from as simple as a millwright to a tile worker to electrician to carpenters, depending upon what goes on a construction site. We relied heavily on data from the Florida Department of Education's apprenticeship programs to understand starting salaries in each one of those classes, and then exit salaries or salaries that would be reached within a 5-year period based upon entry of a worker or student. So at the bottom level, we're talking about $30,000 a year, averaging up to some $53,000 a year, depending on the class of job that they came into. The exit wages were closer after a 5-year period. They ranged between $66,000 a year and $70,000 a year after 5 years in these roles.
Anyone have any comments, thoughts, and questions in regards to it? Sounds so.
Thank you.
We letting you off the hook. I wanted more, but I'm gonna go ahead.
I'm not going too far, trust me. It's still in my cheek.
All right, Brian.
Thank you, Chair. Next, we'll see if they have joined us yet. We have asked HRNA to join us this evening to talk a little bit about the economic impact assessment that was conducted. The city had hired HRNA to do an analysis of the potential economic impacts and fiscal impacts of the project. This report was shared with the committee, I believe, in week 1, and we went into some details of that last week as a follow-up to Vice Chair Mathis's suggestion to have HRNA come and just explain a little bit about the methodology that was used and how those numbers were derived. We have asked HRNA to do that. We did tell them we were expecting about 5:45, so I don't believe they are on yet. Madam Chair, if you would, we'll move on to the next item, and we'll come back when HRNA joins us.
Sounds good.
Next is the small business thresholds. This is a continuation of the conversation that we began in week 2 as it relates to defining small businesses. The ordinance, the community benefit ordinance, does not really provide much specificity, and that was somewhat intentional because we realize every single deal is different. Every single public participation in a project will be different. And so that is an area which we are looking for some guidance from the CBAC. And that is, I don't want to mess up the Zoom TV. So bear with me if you would. It's on the second page or first page of your PowerPoint. This is a slide that had already been shared with the committee back in week 2, but we just wanted to revisit this discussion and make a recommendation to the advisory council from staff, which is to utilize language that is already used by the city's procurement department and Office of Supplier Diversity. We have a definition for small businesses that is used as part of our small business enterprise program. Small business enterprise program is used by the city and many other communities like Pinellas County, Hillsborough County, and City of Tampa. The definition as it is used in the procurement ordinance is a business that has 50 full-time permanent employees or less and an average annual sales volume of $5 million or less for goods, services, and supplies, or $8 million or less annually for construction. The reason we recommend using this as the definition of a small business is because there is reciprocity with other municipalities. So someone that is certified as a small business enterprise vendor in the city of Tampa is also recognized by the city of St. Petersburg. Similarly, if they register with Hillsborough County, we recognize that certification as well. So when we do tracking and reporting, it is easier just because the business community has some familiarity with this definition. It is a little bit easier as our Office of Supplier Diversity is already routinely tracking this information, regularly presenting reports to City Council. It just does make it for a little bit easier of a process. However, that being said, because the ordinance does not speak to what the definition is, it is certainly up to the Community Benefits Advisory Council to make a different recommendation for that small business definition as opposed to what we do use in Office of Supplier Diversity in our procurement department.
Chair Fix-Sanders?
Thank you, Brian. So I think I have 2 questions. So one, this is what we currently use in our city ordinance, as you stated, correct?
That is correct.
And you've gone through this definition with some of the smaller businesses to ensure that they're okay with this, or is this something that we're imposing on our small business community?
So these requirements are known to the business community through our small business enterprise program. And this definition is used by other municipalities as well for that reciprocity. So our small businesses are familiar with the requirements in order to register as an SBE, to become a registered SBE through the city of St. Petersburg. I would have to, and I'm happy to follow up with additional information. I don't know exactly how long we have had this definition in place, but I do know it has been quite some time that we have used this. So there is some familiarity already with the business community of those requirements in order to be an SBE and to register with the city. And therefore, they would have some familiarity with that under the 10% commitment from the Raise Hines team as it relates to the utilization of small businesses, minority businesses, and women-owned businesses.
And thank you for that. The reason why I asked is because the Office of OSD is new. We're just starting to use that. And so I wanted to make sure that this definition wasn't something that was new. Well, I would appreciate if it was new from what we had before, based on the issues we had with small businesses. But because it said OSD and our OSD department is new, how does that currently gel to fix the issues we had previously with small business definitions and doing business with the city?
Yes, thank you, Council Chair. So the SBE program has been in existence for quite some time. It was originally part of the greenhouse. So it was a greenhouse program that a business would apply to, go through the certification process, and then it was actually several different departments that would work. One of the benefits of being, just to take a step back on SBE and why a business would want to do that, often for city contracting, we will look to use a targeted percent of small business enterprise businesses in various city contracts. And sometimes we even shelter bids, so there might be bid preference for an SBE, or maybe it's if you're doing like a solicitation, there might be additional points added for being an SBE. It provides a benefit for our local small business community. Because there are a lot of different departments that do contracting, it was a little confusing in terms of tracking and providing that information to City Council. And so one of the things that administration did was create the Office of Supplier Diversity to centralize that, to bring our SBE program under procurement, as those are the procurement department is the one that is doing those solicitations or managing the solicitations. So it does make it easier to track and to coordinate from various departments as they are looking to procure goods, services, or construction-related activities, that it's all centralized and they have a better understanding of really what is being utilized. So when Office of Supplier Diversity was created, we transferred the SBE program from the greenhouse to OSD, an existing program to a new department, and then we've now expanded upon that once City Council approved the MBE program, the Minority Owned Business Program, now also falls under Office of Supplier Diversity. So the intention with that office is that all of our contracting and procurement opportunities are centralized and they can be more easily managed and tracked by the city.
So it looks like HR and A are joining us. Do we want to press pause on this and go to them, or you want us to remain focused on this?
Madam Chair, that
Completely up to me.
whatever is your pleasure.
Because I recognize that they're joining via Zoom, and not to hold them in the space of our conversations, because I have questions on this. Is everyone okay with pressing pause on this? All right, let's go.
Thank you very much. So we are joined by Carrie Hirstein and Thomas Simpson with HR&A. Again, just to reiterate, the city had hired HR&A to really do two different things for us. One was take a look at the 4 proposals that were received to the city's request for proposals for this project, and do a comparison of the economic, fiscal, and social or community impacts that those proposals provided. That was shared with City Council, with the mayor, as the mayor made his deliberation on a preferred developer. Then once Raise Hines was selected by the mayor as the preferred developer, we asked HR&A to come back and do an analysis based on the development schedule that had been identified. So when we look at things in the term sheet, like the number of dwelling units that are being created, office space being created, we asked them to take a look at all of those different inputs, and then based on those inputs, provide some economic and fiscal projections for us, so we can really start to understand some of the economic revenue that will be generated from the project. For instance, we have shared the HR&A report that talks about the new gross tax revenue, so taxes that would be added from this development. That was derived based on the development program that has been negotiated with Raise Hines. So I asked them to join us just to answer any questions that the committee has, provide a little bit of methodology understanding, how they derived those numbers, what the process was used in order to get those economic outputs, and of course, provide any other additional information that would be helpful to the committee.
Thank you.
Okay, I think they're ready to speak when they decide to unmute. It's on them. Can you guys hear us?
You're still showing on mute.
I unmuted them.
Do they hear us?
Can you guys
Carrie,
hear
can
us?
you hear us?
Looked like it.
We're talking.
The answer is no.
Carrie- Oh, well, I apologize for technical difficulties. Carrie and Thomas, thank you for joining us this evening. We just kind of briefly summarize the charge from the city to HR&A to look at the economic impacts and fiscal impacts of this project. We have shared the report that you had done for the city with the committee. If you would like just to talk at a very brief high level about the methodology that you use in order to derive those numbers, and then, of course, any questions from our advisory council.
Sure, thanks, Brian. So just by means of introduction, I'm Terry Herstein, and I'm joined by Thomas Simpson. We're from HRNA Advisors. We're a real estate, economic development, and public policy consulting firm with a national presence. And part of the work we do is helping advise clients and work with them to understand some of the economic impacts and benefits from projects such as these. And we work really all across the gamut, from supporting cities and government clients to nonprofit institutions to the private sector network. For this assignment, our client is the city of St. Petersburg, and we were asked to take an objective look at the potential economic and fiscal impacts from the district development at the gas plant site, and to layer over analysis that has been conducted by Victus Advisors on behalf of Pinellas County earlier, a year prior. So our work really was to take the proposed development program. We had done some prior work to look at that from a market perspective when we were supporting the evaluation of proposals. So had the value of some due diligence to look at the viability of that program. We looked at the phasing schedule that Hines had provided, and we estimated two types of major impacts, which is consistent with the methodology that we undertake on dozens upon dozens of projects when we do this work across the country. First, one-time impacts that come from construction activity. In this case, they're not truly one time, but they happen in a phased process over time as the project is built out, looking at some of the construction estimates that the Hines Ridge team had made for the development project. The second types of impacts that we look at for the district development are, we look at the particular uses that are there: residential development, office development, retail, entertainment. And based on our work, we have standards on workers and activity on a per square foot basis that we layer over to understand the potential of those uses to produce jobs and produce economic output. So we also use that to derive, based on comparable projects, what typical property tax streams, ad valorem tax streams, can be expected from that type of development over time. And sometimes we did not do in this case because we were moving very quickly. We'll look at the overall economic output of the whole development. That is something that Victus Advisors did for the stadium, but we did not do in this case. We also tried to differentiate between what are gross impacts and net impacts. In other words, but for the presence of the project, what spending is happening in the economy? What does the presence of the project potentially displace in terms of spending versus what new spending is brought on? And we looked at rules of thumb that we've used across the country to derive that. So our work is essentially, I think, very consistent with the methodologies we've used on other projects, again, focused on the district development. We spent some time with Victus Advisors to make sure that we understood the basis of their modeling. It is consistent with how we would undertake that work. And in those discussions with them, felt relatively comfortable in adapting their model outputs to include in our report. So, Thomas, anything to add there? That's just sort of a brief overview of our methodology. We're, of course, happy to answer any questions.
I heard him say, Thomas, did he have anything to add? I'm assuming Thomas he didn't have anything.
No, I think Terry pretty much covered it. I think the only other thing to highlight in terms of those property tax, estimates, which capture a lot of the fiscal impacts that we were tasked with measuring, we spent a lot of time looking at, comparable development in the region to generate, from what a per square foot value for those different uses that the development program comprises, and, model those out over time as the development, actually delivers.
All right, thank you. Does anyone have any questions of this team?
I have 3 questions. So the first question I have in regards to the property taxes, you're estimating them based on the stadium multiplier effect, correct? A question maybe for Carrie.
Okay, so, sorry, the question is,
The-
is there a connection between the property taxes we've projected versus the impact from the stadiums? From the
Yes.
stadium activity? Okay, so those are 2 separate things. So Victus Advisors is looking at a series of impacts associated with stadium activity. They measure 3 types of impacts. One are direct impacts of activity occurring at the stadium. People come, they buy a ticket to an event, they purchase food and beverages or merchandise at that event. Those are all direct revenues. But they also look at indirect and induced spending, which are, as you referenced, the multiplier impacts that we use in economic impact analysis. Indirect is essentially the business activity that supports that economic activity at the ballpark. And induced activity are the fact that this economic activity is creating jobs. Workers then have income. They need to go and eat lunch. They spend money at nearby stores and nearby businesses, and that's induced spending. So Victus Advisors measured all of that associated with a program of events and activities at the ballpark. We separately then looked at the district development, and in terms of the tax stream that the property tax stream that we would expect the district development to create. So they're 2 separate types of value that are created, but they are separate and apart from one another. Victus Advisors did, by the way, an analysis of the district development. It was done at a prior point before there was clarity on the full development. So all we adapted from their analysis was the stadium impacts, but we reran our own analysis on the district impact. So there may be some confusion looking back on their report because they did look at both. We updated the district.
Okay, so the question that I'm asking is the attendance at the stadium and how it's estimated to impact the economic benefit. So the question is, the Victus Advisor study is assuming a full stadium, 30,000 attendees per game. And we know that on average, we have 17,000 attendees per game, which is about 60% of attendance. So if we're assuming that there's a full stadium for indirect economic benefits, then I think that we should adjust the benefits to reflect the actual attendance. It's just a comment that I wanted to point out on how the study is based on Victus Advisors, because I believe the HRNA is based on Victus potentially.
As it relates to the stadium impacts, you're correct. So HRNA, and Carrie, please correct me if I get any of this wrong, that HRNA used the Victus report as it related to the stadium impacts itself. For everything else, like the property taxes, because the stadium is going to be owned by Pinellas County, it's not going to generate any property taxes. That was looked at by HRNA using the targeted development program that has been negotiated with Ray's Hines. So you are correct that the Victus report was used for instance, the stadium job construction numbers. That came from the Victus report. Anything related to the rest of the development, the other 65 acres of vertical development, HRNA had run that separately from the Victus report, not using that as the base or the foundation for it. Instead, they used the development program as that base when coming up with their economic impacts.
Okay, but
Yeah, and if I could, sorry.
go ahead.
I was gonna add, the property tax impacts are, while we expect that there is a sort of, symbiotic relationship between the development, the commercial development and the stadium to some extent, the property tax revenue that would be generated by the commercial development is sort of irrespective of the attendance at the average attendance, for a game at the ballpark. And so it's really based on the intensity of development in terms of the square footage delivered that the Heinz team would bring in terms of housing, office, and retail. And in our analysis, it's not the attendance at a ball game doesn't feed into the way that we would value those properties.
And I think it's worth it. It may be worth a question to Victus advisors on the assumptions about attendance. Maybe, I'm not sure if there's a place in the report where you saw the comparison of capacity versus attendance projections. There's certainly sort of a table of 3 different events scenarios in terms of the number and type of events, but it may be worth a question just to confirm that, because I would be, I don't know, I would personally be surprised if they assumed full attendance for all events. And, they were working on behalf of the county. It would be, while there is expected to be a boost, I would assume, in attendance with a new stadium for a period of time, that one would want to sort of understand that. But that's not information. Is that something that's in the report that I may have missed?
Hold on one second. Member Carey, I'd like to shift over to James because I think he has some feedback to provide.
Well, I just wanted to provide some clarification to specifically the question that Commissioner Mueller asked, and Carrie or Thomas, you can correct me, but specifically, you all are giving your methodology as it relates to the study that you all did for the city of St. Petersburg. And I want to hone in on a particular number, which is the $1.46 billion in gross property tax cumulative over 30 years. And is it correct that that number is not affected by stadium attendance at all?
Correct. That number, go ahead, Jared.
Go ahead, Thomas.
No, I was just going to say that number, in the way that we calculate that number, the stadium attendance does not feed into that calculation anyway.
So just for clarification for the commission, that is going to be the largest economic impact as it relates to the development, is the gross property tax revenue. And again, as was mentioned by Thomas and Carrie, that is net new because it currently generates no property tax. So that $1.46 billion really has nothing to do with the attendance of the stadium. It has more to do with the construction of new hotels, entertainment facilities, office buildings. Now, there are some other revenue estimates that relate to sales tax, hotel tax, and ballpark sale and tourism tax, which could potentially be tied into or referenced back to the Victus study. But I just wanted to make it clear to the commission that the $1.46 billion is strictly related to net new property tax created by the developer.
Okay, thank you so much for that, James. Go ahead, Carrie, and then I'd like for Ms. Gloria to have an opportunity to ask a question.
I want to ask about the property tax revenue for that site for the new construction that Heinz is building. Because the committee of the whole meeting on October 26th, Heinz was asked when they start paying property tax, and they don't pay property tax when they assume ownership of the property, and they don't start paying property tax when they start construction. They start paying property tax once a building is put into service.
They would pay property taxes immediately when they acquire the property. When the property comes from county ownership to the ownership of Ray's Heinz, property taxes immediately due.
Well, that's completely different than what we talked about in the committee of the whole meeting.
But it is true that as new development comes online, the value of the property will greatly increase versus, what it would be as a urban parking lot, for instance. And in our analysis, we don't assume that all the development, comes online in year one. It's timed based on the projected, delivery of those buildings over time. And so, the property tax numbers grow as the project, builds out.
So
Okay.
generally what would happen is when the city sells a parcel to Raise Hines, at the point of sale, property tax become due to Raise Hines are responsible for the property tax on vacant land. As they develop that vacant land, the property taxes would increase based on the improvements made on the vacant land. I believe that is factored into the estimate provided by HR.
Thank you so much for that. Hold on one second, Carrie. Attorney D has confirmed that. Well, I'm sorry, I'm not speaking on your behalf.
Sure, I was just, yeah, I mean, Mr. Corbett's assessment there is spot on and has been the case since the beginning of this negotiation.
Okay, thank you so much for that. Go ahead, Carrie, but then I do want to give an
I
opportunity.
understand. I'm trying to ask the questions as
Go ahead.
quickly as I can.
Mhm.
The other question I have is that the majority of the tax revenue is collected at the end of the 30 years, correct? It's like year 25 is when it starts really accumulating.
It will, as the development, more of the project comes online, yes. So it will escalate over the 30 years, 20 years to build out. Let's say that final building comes online, it will hit the tax rolls the following year as that new improved property. So we'll really start collecting the greatest amount of new taxes in year 21 and beyond. So the 30-year estimate that's provided, really, you are correct. In the first couple of years, there will not be much. It will be vacant land that will be taxed. As those improved sites come online, that will continue to increase, but it will hit its peak at year 21 and beyond once the development has been completely built out and has fully hit the tax rolls.
Last question I have. So you're estimating the tax revenues based on the stadium and then the development of the 60 acres. But if we were to develop the whole 80 acres without a stadium, the tax revenue would be the same. So there's not an increased tax revenue from the multiplier effect of the stadium.
Yeah, I don't think we're saying, I think that my original point was that the property tax revenue is not affected by the stadium at all. I think what you're asking is a philosophical question. Would the development exist in the same manner if there was no stadium? Hines has said that as an experienced developer, they would say no because the stadium acts as an anchor. But again, that's a hypothetical. I can't answer that question. What I am saying is that based on HRNA's analysis, regardless of the stadium, the $1.46 million that they're estimating would remain with no stadium multiplier. But also, I think it's important to note that, as Brian said, the highest or the peak, or not, I shouldn't say the peak, the tax benefit will ramp up. Obviously, from year one, it will be low as structures are brought online, with the anticipation that most or all the structures will be completed at 20 years. So from year 21 to 30 is going to be the highest amount. But I think it's important to note that the property taxes don't stop at year 30. Year 31, year 40, year 50, the city is here forever generally. So we gave a 30-year picture, but it does not stop at that 30-year period.
And just to add a little more to what Mr. Corbett was saying, the city back in, I believe it was 2016, we did two conceptual master plans for this site. One was looking at redevelopment with the ballpark, and one was looking at redevelopment if there was no ballpark on the site. And while there was more housing units overall without a ballpark, there was actually less that was expected as it relates to office, entertainment uses, ancillary uses, because of the fact that there wasn't that anchor there. So generally, we would not have the same impact from an office space perspective because businesses want to be in close proximity to an anchor tenant. Similarly with entertainment, retail, restaurants, even, at probably the Rays' lowest year of attendance, that is still millions of people that are coming to that site over the year to go to those restaurants and to go to the retail. So we did see an increase in kind of the overall development potential for effectively everything but residential during that conceptual master plan. Now, I don't know exactly what if Heinz looked at alternatives and other anchors, if that was ever part of their consideration or not. But just when we did our conceptual master plans, that was one of the takeaways, was that that anchor tenant did make some of those other uses actually increase in that demand because of the fact having that anchor there brought additional people on the site and made it more desirable for businesses, entertainment, and retail.
All right, thank you so much, Ms. Gloria.
Right. My question is, I think what we're here for, the $50 million in community benefits. My question is, it says they will invest, but I think they maybe will, because there's nothing guaranteed and there's nothing upfront in terms of the $50 million of community benefits. So how did you calculate that, and what guarantees do we have that there will be $50 million spent in community benefits? Because that too comes on over a period of time, and there are no guarantees that it's going to happen.
So, Committee Member Campbell, are you referencing the developer contribution section
Yes.
of that?
Yes.
So that community benefit 50 million piece was taken from our term sheet that was negotiated with Raise Hines. That is effectively one of the items that the CBAC has been looking at. Within that $50 million, there are all of the various programs that Mr. Frazier has spoke about before, the $15 million that has been identified to come to the city to support the Housing for All plan, the $10 million that has been earmarked for the Woodson Museum, amongst a lot of other benefits that are part of that $50 million. What will occur after the CBAC process? Legal has been and will continue to be working on various agreement documents. Those agreement documents will have penalties. Some of them may be financial in nature. It could be that if something is not done, it must be replaced with something else. We will work with Raise Hines to really figure out exactly what the appropriate remedy should be for non-compliance on that. And then finally, that agreement is taken as part of a lot of different agreements to City Council for final approval. So there will absolutely be teeth in this. They will be held to accountability for that $50 million. Now, you are correct. It does not all come on day one. If City Council approves the agreement, Raise Hines doesn't just hand a check over the next day. It will unfold over the development time period. And Mr. Frazier did share some of that prospective timing at one of our previous meetings. But ultimately, once we do have the benefit package and we have the recommendation from the CBAC, we will have a legal binding agreement between the city and Raise Hines to do exactly what they have promised the committee, what they have promised the CBAC, administration, and City Council that they will do. And there will be legal remedies for noncompliance.
And how's that worked in the past?
I don't know if we have ever had
We haven't had a
project
CBA before, but
that has come in and offered $50 million, and we've never had a project that has successfully
But you've
gone
had
through the
other
whole
projects.
CBAC process.
You've had other projects before. You've had projects where you had, people who said they were going to do things. And I think for the most part, we could say that a lot of those things didn't happen. And we just don't want this to be another project that doesn't happen.
Commissioner Campbell, if I may, I think one of the distinctions here is I can't point to a project where contractually it's going to be part of the documents or the part of the agreement that this commission is assisting us with creating, is that this will be folded into a development agreement and it will be a legally binding document. This is not a promise that, hey, we will do this. Specifically for the $15 million, for example, there will be a dollar amount tied to every market rate unit that they construct. So it's a known entity that when this is done, here's the amount due. So the difference, I believe, in this instance is that this will be spelled out. While this is a commitment right now, it will turn into a contractual agreement that will have specific requirements to ensure that we actually receive those benefits.
So it's trust me.
It's a contract.
It's a contract that has provisions for default that the city would fully use in terms of enforcement and imposing consequences for failure to do the thing that you promised And that's the whole point here, is that it's not a handshake or some promise. It's something that's in writing and is legally enforceable in a court of law.
All right, so we'll start with Ms. Debbie and then we'll go here and then we'll come back up to Jason.
Okay, so I think this is an important conversation, the penalties portion, but that's getting away from the HRNA study. So can we finish with them and let them go
Mhm.
and then have this conversation?
Agree.
Because I would like to know,
I have
can we make a recommendation on penalties? But I want to do that later.
All righty, so we'll go.
Yeah, thank you. So I do have some questions regarding the HRNA study here. The 32,000 estimated jobs that are being created from this potentially. The revenue that we're talking about, 2.14 billion on the sheet here. Now, that's the district will generate that, but is there a way to calculate how 32,000 new jobs are going to impact the city as a whole? Is that figure anywhere?
That's an excellent question, committee member. I do believe in the impact report that was provided by Raise Hines. So Raise Hines has also done a third-party study looking at their own revenue projections. And I do believe that they had assigned a wage value, what that amount of new job creation would mean in terms of overall economic impact as new wages to the area. I unfortunately do not have that report directly in front of me, but we will look that up and provide that information.
I think it's important to know what the total impact of 32,000 jobs is going to be to the whole city. My second question is, how will the tax implications be on the affordable housing units, and will those units be taxed the same as a market rate unit? In other words, the property tax value, even though it's an affordable housing unit, is that going to be taxed the same as the other 5,000 potential units?
It would be taxing the same in the sense that it's based on the value of the improvement. So it's whatever the millage rate is.
Okay, so the affordable units are going to pay the same property tax basically that a market rate unit would pay.
Based on the value of the building.
And that's all I have for them.
Committee member Wellington, if
Yes.
I may, in their impact report, they do identify annual economic impacts at full build out, once the project is complete, of $1.4 billion annually to Pinellas County, and labor earnings of $656 million annually from the job creation.
Okay, I do have a follow-up question then. Sorry, this is it.
Can I clarify one more thing on the jobs too? Just the 32,900 estimated full-time equivalent jobs are associated with the build out of the district. And so those are jobs that break down roughly, as you can see in our memo, between district construction and assumptions on stadium construction. Those are full-time equivalent job years. So essentially that's a measure of jobs per year, a year-long job over the course of build out on a full-time basis. At the stabilization of the district itself, we project the district will employ 7,000 workers. And based on Thickness's analysis, that the stadium will employ 4,000 full and part-time workers each year. So I just want to make sure that we're clear on the distinction between construction-based jobs associated with construction development activity versus jobs associated with the operations of the stadium and the district.
And if I may, just one further point of clarification on that, the 4,000 jobs that are related to the stadium are very similar to the numbers that are currently employed at the existing Tropicana field site. So that's really retention of those 4,000 jobs. It would not be an additional 4,000 over what is currently employed at the stadium.
And to the committee members' question, the Victus Advisors report does look at the economic impact of those stadium jobs and spending associated with those workers. And HRA study does not. So those 7,000 jobs, to your point, are creating additional economic benefits throughout the community.
Alrighty, I want to come to.
I just have one little small follow-up question, which was that all these tax dollars and things that we're talking about, I want to hope that it's going to help the affordable housing situation even more because we're generating additional tax dollars that would hopefully go towards that, right?
Certainly one of the many areas in which that tax revenue would go. So that would ultimately go to kind of the city's general fund. So that goes to city services, police, fire, utilities. It would go to help support some of the debt service that would be required to finance this project.
It just wasn't specifically
Yes.
said here.
Yes.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
All right, Vice Chair.
Thank you, Chair Matthews. I'm going to hold my questions until we talk about penalties.
Okay. All right, any?
I've got one other quick thing. I mean, all these figures that we're looking at here, like the 1.46 billion in gross property tax breakdowns and all that impacts, it's really difficult to evaluate what that actually means or whether it means much at all, because it has to be looked at in terms of alternatives and alternative ways of developing this. Other ways of developing this area might produce more, might produce less than that 1.46 billion. It would depend on the kind of development that was actually done. So to make the comparison to these figures, as if nothing would happen, as if that land would stay vacant for the next 30 years and absolutely nothing would happen and there'd be no development on it, would be a ridiculous way to look at this fact. I mean, you have to look at these figures and compare them to estimates of different ways of developing land. And I'm not saying that land necessarily needs to be developed to maximize tax revenues, because we have social purposes and things of that sort too that may be equally important in terms of just tax revenue enhancement. But it's just important that we look at it in that way, because frankly, I think an awful lot of other ways of developing this area might produce the same or even more in terms of, not only might, quite likely would produce the same or more. So to look at this as, this is what you would gain compared to making nothing in additional taxes is not a proper way to be looking at this.
Thank you so much. Carrie?
I just have one add-on comment to that in regards to the estimated economic benefits, and that would be in regards to the model study that we've used here at the city of St. Petersburg, which is the Atlanta Braves Stadium. And we have, that project also has private development adjacent to stadium construction. And the studies are showing that the private developer is making substantial profits, $15 million a quarter in a third quarter, so $60 million a year. And that Atlanta, Cobb County is on the hook for an additional $15 million a year in cost. And they're actually a bigger city and they have higher attendance. And I think that that project shows a case study that exists in real life, not just the estimated potential benefit, but actual case study. That's all I wanted to add.
Thank you so much. Any other questions for the HRNA team? Okay, they can be released. Thank you.
Thank you, Carrie. Thank you, Thomas.
Thank you all. Take care.
All righty, so we want to go ahead and circle back to our discussion in regards to small business.
Thank you, Chair. So now we can display it for the audience. The middle paragraph is that Office of Supplier Diversity definition: 50 full-time permanent employees or less, annual sales volume averaged over the last 3 years of 5 million or less for goods, services, and supplies, or $8 million or less for construction.
So I just have a comment. I think they're, and have knowledge of the OSD definition. I think there's value in the fact that the CBAC committee said that particular ordinance in regards to minority-owned businesses should be in place. And I'm back to what I originally said. Is there a way for us to marry the two together so that one is not obsolete of the other? That's just a comment.
If I may, Chair Matthews, thank you. We've had significant dialogue with the city as it relates to the definitions of both the SBE, small business enterprise, as well as the minority women business enterprise. And we want to make this as an inclusive process as possible, creating and generating more opportunities for our community. The way the language is written in for the city right now, your MWBE program strictly only points to minority-owned business, which is Black and Latino, and women-owned businesses. Small business only equate to small business at 8 million for construction and 5 million for A&E services. We would like to propose what is more widely accepted in the private arena, which is what we've talked to the city about. We'd also like to be able to include other disenfranchised businesses, such as veteran-owned businesses, LGBTQ businesses in this format. If we stick to what the city has in place, we will be restricted from doing that. So again, we have heard what this committee has said. We're trying to make this as inclusive as possible. And I want to continue having that dialogue with the city to make sure that we are being as inclusive as possible.
All right, thank you so much for that. So my thought is not necessarily, I know that we're in this space discussing the gas plant project, but my vision is for any other project that comes before the CBAC, not making one obsolete over the other. But that's, yes, Ms. Gloria.
I would also recommend that if we could take a look at ex-offenders as a separate category as well, that could be included because it's a group that is totally disenfranchised. And I think small businesses or entrepreneurship is the way for a lot of them to really reintegrate into the community. So I think that, if we're going to add all these other groups, I'd like to see us add ex-offenders or returning citizens, as we call them.
So can I just say one more thing, Brian? So we just as a point of reference, like this came up as a conversation, I think 3 meetings ago. And we said that as a committee, we would submit suggestions by that Friday. I'm assuming, I know I didn't submit a suggestion. I'm not gonna speak for my other committee members, but I do think it's important that we move forward with something as it relates to this, because now we are down to the wire. And if we don't move forward with something, then there will be nothing.
I totally agree.
Yes, sir.
If I just may respond, Committee Member Campbell, thank you. The disadvantaged workers definition, which the CBAC had voted on at the last meeting to make a recommendation, 15% of the total labor hours go to disadvantaged workers. That kind of reentry is one of those categories that is included in that. So actually, the CBAC has already taken action to tell us they want that included in there, and we
Okay, so under the disadvantaged worker. Okay, great.
I'm sorry, and I'm gonna put a voice to the conversation I was just having. Thank you for bringing that up, Brian. I know that we voted for the apprentices, the disadvantaged workers, and the additional pieces, but I don't think we circled back on the reporting piece where we're requesting that the development team provide quarterly reports. I don't recall us circling back. We did? So it's me. Okay, well, disregard.
Yeah, well, if we're going to bring that up, last meeting attached to the agenda, with one clip for all the items, was this picture. You all received it last meeting, and inside is this, I believe, the city's requirements for monitoring the disadvantaged workers and the pay rate. Is that true what this is?
that is as it relates to the city's procurement ordinances.
Right.
Yes. So instead of what we voted for compliance was simply written quarterly reports, this is much more thorough. They require the apprentice is all three to have weekly reports from the developer to the city, and then the city analyzes that quarterly. And then if they don't comply, there's penalties. So this is much superior to what we asked last time. And I thank you for including it in our but we didn't have a chance to read it because it came right with the agenda, right at the meeting. But I've read it since, and I want to move that we replace what we voted on last time with this more thorough compliance way that the city does, but we also require it for the Ray's Hines projects.
So Brian, correct me if I'm wrong. I don't, and I may be wrong, but I don't recall us voting. I believe Hendrick said that it's a part of the process. So we never circled back specifically to a motion.
And where
in
do
regards
we have
to
that
it.
now, or is that something that was passed out?
This was passed out at the last meeting.
Oh, I don't have it.
We did vote, yes. We voted, we did vote for the quarterly, written quarterly reports. It should be in the minutes, isn't it?
So in the minutes, Committee Member Nissen made a motion to require quarterly written reports on compliance with the components of the CBA program. Committee Member Campbell seconded the motion, and it was passed unanimously.
Okay, thank you.
I'm moving to replace that with this. And it's several pages. And look, you want to look for this. It was handed out with the agenda right at the meeting, so none of us had read it. But it was with the agenda of the last meeting and the clip to it, but towards the back.
Hmm.
No, I think that's.
For employing apprentices.
Oh, okay, it's under,
It's right after this map.
yeah, if you look at your CBA, materials.
Yeah.
Can I ask a practical question? And actually, this is of Council Chair Sanders. So it's the council that is going to be reviewing these reports, am I correct?
Mhm.
So if you get weekly reports, is that a good way that you're reporting as opposed to quarterly?
I would speaking for Deborah.
The Office of Supplier
Yes,
Diversity.
And what's happening with them?
So that they are using that to determine compliance. So they receive, it is biweekly payrolls are submitted to the Office of Supplier Diversity. They then ensure that those payrolls are compliant with either the disadvantaged workers or they will look at SBE requirements. They track that information over the entire year, but then we provide quarterly updates to City Council as it relates to the progress that is being made on those projects and those commitments. So, for example, if a project makes a 10% commitment, we will be tracking that all throughout the project. They're not going to probably hit 10% on day one, but we will track how it's going and then can course correct if it seems like they're not going to hit their marks. Hopefully, they're all exceeding their marks, and we can show that they're far ahead of 10%.
And for clarity, they would not come to us automatically.
It would come quarterly.
Well, not even quarterly. It would be at the request of a council member asking for a report from the Office of OSD. It's not something that would just be automatic.
I just want to make sure that it's not overburdening the system, like it, so, and when reports are generated, a lot of times they're not looked at, but they are actually reviewing them and holding them accountable.
That is correct.
That was my main concern.
So I've made a motion.
Can you repeat your motion, please?
My motion is to replace what we said, the written quarterly reports is the method of compliance, to replace that with this document. And you didn't give us the page that starts says major constructions requirements for employing apprentices, but I can add disadvantaged workers and pay wages.
Committee Member Whitney, what is the code? It should be the very top. What is the section?
Section 2-263,
2263.
and particularly sub K, which deals with compliance, corrective action, and consequences for non-compliance.
Well, okay, wait a minute. That's not what she's asking. You're asking for this section right here,
Well,
correct?
the whole, all these pages. It
It's
covers
also
all three.
270.
Oh, yeah, it's a lot, Mike.
For
It's-
the-
Well, for the disadvantaged workers, yeah, I was
Yeah,
just trying
and
to,
the pay rates.
Yeah, so it's bigger than the
Sorry.
sub K that you just referenced.
And two.
This
277.
starts all the way A through N, and then
Numbers, I didn't
section
have any
two
numbers.
270
Oh, there.
Section
goes
2,
all the way through. So there's quite a bit here
263.
versus what we
Okay,
voted on
mine's
last week.
In the clip on that
It's
one.
up there.
yeah, you just asked for quarterly reports for
So,
apprentices, disadvantaged workers, and responsible wage.
so do we need to add all of that? No, I'm
And has-
asking.
and has everybody had an opportunity to review
I have
all of those code sections?
I have
have
not.
not.
Well, do you want to wait till next meeting?
I only have one more.
With the request that we could get it sent out electronically so we could take a look at it.
We have it.
It's in one of the packets from
Mhm.
It's
last time.
from last.
Yeah.
meeting.
We will resend it to the committee just to make sure you've got it at the top of your email.
Okay,
It was the part of last time's packet that had that blue.
Right.
Alrighty, so, Dr. Whitney, are you okay with withdrawing your motion?
Not withdrawing, delaying it till next
Delaying it
meeting.
until next week?
So it'll be on the agenda.
Same thing.
Same thing?
Yeah.
It's the same thing.
Okay. Alrighty. So it sounds as if we still have not, or nowhere in the space of what we're gonna do with the definition. Does anyone have any thoughts, comments in regards to it?
Clarification for me.
Mhm.
So what were we looking to vote on just then, since we'd already come to the conclusion that we voted on the last part? What are you referencing, Chair?
So the recommendation by city team is to move forward with the OSD version and not the ordinance, correct, Brian?
So our ordinance doesn't define small business for the purposes of tracking. So Raise Hines has made a commitment of 10% with a goal of 30%. We are looking for input from the CBAC as to what is that 10% and 30% goal being measured against? What is that definition of a small business that should be looked at when viewing how are they doing on that 10% commitment? As it relates to minority-owned businesses and women-owned businesses, the community benefits ordinance code is a little bit more specific on that language, which is just effectively owned 51% or more by a minority or 51% or more by a woman makes that a minority-owned or woman-owned business. That one's a little bit easier, but for the purposes of defining what is a small business and what constitutes a small business for the purposes of compliance, that is where we are looking for some feedback.
Okay. So I would actually move approval of that, but I just wanted to make sure from Chair Matthews, I know that that's where you inquired about the breakdown when we discussed it last week. Are you okay with where we are with that before I motion, hoping for a second?
I'm not okay with removing the specific verbiage of minority owned and women owned and et cetera, et cetera. However, it's to the majority will of this body, but I'm not okay with the OSD version being the guiding one.
Chair Matthews, if I may, the minority-owned and women-owned definitions, because those are in the ordinance for community benefits, that's in place. All we are suggesting with this OSD language is specifically related to small businesses. The other requirements or language surrounding minority-owned businesses and women-owned businesses still remains. It is still part of that 10% overall commitment, 30% goal. But for the purposes of small business, that is where staff is recommending the OSD language.
So this is like a master framework for small business. The SBE and MBE are like sub, they're more defined.
That is correct, and they would not come with the same limitations as it relates to employees and income levels.
And is the percentage of guarantee, is that encompassing all of the the categories, or is it, okay?
That is correct. Yes. So the commitment from Raise Hines is 10% contracting to small businesses, minority businesses, or women-owned businesses.
So they in fact could do 10% of small businesses and not have any minority businesses.
No, can't, yes.
Yes, that is correct.
And you
Is that
said
okay?
you have a monitoring for the minority and the women-owned, but you're just wanting clarity on this. So would it help to make a motion? Am I correct on that?
Yes.
And there's monitoring on it.
That is correct. Yes.
Do you all want to make a motion on, or change this second one on the office or
Change it to,
supplier?
change it to
But
what?
you were talking about some possible changes a
Well,
couple meetings ago.
well, I had already made a motion for approval, but Chair Matthews said she wasn't comfortable with it as is, and Mr. Caper just clarified that her concern will be addressed specifically for minority and women-owned, already documented by the city in our process moving forward. And am I missing anything on that?
You are correct, Council
Okay,
Chair.
So you're moving?
I made a motion to accept.
Can you
I
repeat your
second.
motion?
Oh,
Yes,
okay.
ma'am.
I said, well, okay, so and Mr. Caper, please correct me, or no, actually to be Attorney Dima. I'm simply making a motion to accept the OSD definition of small business.
I
Right.
second.
In addition to the definition that's already there, they can read in harmony. This has more objective standards in it. So in my opinion, adding this on to the existing small business definition in the community benefits ordinance, it works
Okay.
if
Yeah.
it's the will of the body.
All right, so we have a motion. I heard a second. All right, Ms. Debbie, all right. And so, any comments or thoughts before we move forward with? All right.
I do have one question. The only question I have is, does anybody of us, any of us have an alternative? I mean, if we don't, I think we should just vote yes on this motion.
Well, we were asked for
But
one and nobody.
I know, I wasn't able to come up with one, and I'm just basically asking, was anybody else? Because if we didn't, it may not be the best, but it's what we got, and I think we need to move. So that's what I'm thinking. That's why I'm asking if anybody else came up with anything different.
All right, so we have a motion, we have a second.
And Chair, for all of these substantive motions, I would like a roll call, as
Yes,
we
sir.
established last week. Yeah.
You know
thank
what? Yes, sir. Roll call vote.
All right, roll call. Whitney,
Yes.
Neeson,
Yes.
Campbell,
Yes.
Mueller,
Yes.
Reeser,
Yes.
Wallington,
Yes.
Council Chair Sanders,
Yes.
Chair Matthews,
No.
Vice Chair Mathis.
Yes.
Motion passes majority vote with Chair Matthews voting against.
Okay, thank you. All righty, Brian, back to you.
Thank you, Chair. So the next item that we wanted to discuss, switch this quickly, is a document that we started to discuss back in week 2 that really looked at the CBA guidance requirements. So there is a guidance document that was approved by City Council via resolution. This is the very big, long page that you have in your backup materials. And there isn't too much new information versus what had been presented before. But we did want to just go through that again and talk what is required by the guidance document versus what Raise Hines has committed to. We have plugged in some of the recommendations from the CBAC as well as what Raise Hines has committed to. So based on the guidance document, the developer must create an impact report. The impact report was created by Raise Hines and that was submitted to the CBAC and to the public on December 7th. They must hold a meeting in the neighborhood in which the project is occurring, and that occurred on December 13th at the Coliseum. They must construct streetscape improvements to match an existing area master plan. They are proposing to adhere to the recommendations of the Complete Streets Implementation Plan. And they've also committed to new rights of way that would be interconnected, wide sidewalks, planting zones, and seating areas integrated onto the site, with special attention being paid to crosswalks and trail connections for pedestrian safety and comfort. And just to clarify, these responses they're slightly abbreviated from what was contained in the impact report, but this is Ray's Hines language that was presented to the city and to the CBAC through that impact report. They must utilize local workforce partners to employ local residents for job opportunities. They have committed through the $50 million intentional equity piece, $3.75 million for diverse hiring and supplier contracts for construction projects, job training, and entrepreneurship programs. They must utilize apprentices that are participating in an apprenticeship program registered with the State of Florida Department of Education. And they have made a commitment of up to 50 individuals annually for craft trade apprenticeship development in construction and land development trades, with a focus of increasing productivity and improving the local workforce. And they did agree to do that in compliance with the Florida Department of Education standards. The guidance document states they must utilize disadvantaged workers as defined in the city code to perform construction work on a covered project. The CBAC has already voted to request 15% of the hours go to disadvantaged workers. Hines and Ray's have agreed to use disadvantaged workers to perform construction services and have agreed to have further conversations with the city on the participation percentages. The guidance document states they must utilize a minimum of 10% participation from small business, women-owned business, or minority-owned businesses for the development, design, and construction of the project, with a goal of 30%. They have mirrored that. They have committed to 10% with a long-term goal of 30% participation in the project. They must design and construct the project to either LEED Silver standards or an alternative equivalent green building standard that would be approved ultimately by City Council when that community benefit agreement document is provided to them. The Ray's Hines team has identified 9 sustainability strategies that they will utilize. Many of these are in concert with the LEED building. There has not been a specific commitment to doing LEED or other building certification. However, they have deferred to the sustainability strategies that are in line with that. Yes, Committee Member
Yes,
Whitney.
I would like to make a motion. It'll say CBA moves that Hines Ray's design, quote from the, what is on the left side there, design, construct, and the covered project to the current LEED Silver standard developed by the U.S. Green Council, period. So moved.
I need some discussion.
Could we ask why they did? It seems like just doing the LEED standard would be the simplest, most elegant solution because everybody sort of knows what that is. What's the rationale for using an alternative? The code allows for an alternative. I'm not an environmental engineer. I don't know if these 9 qualifications are consistent with LEED standards. So it'd be helpful to know if maybe this is going above and beyond LEED standard. Maybe it's not meeting the LEED standard, but it'd be helpful to know why they chose not to just do the LEED standard because that seems like the easiest option.
And I know Mr. Harrison is not with us today. I don't know if the team is prepared to respond to that. Otherwise, we will seek clarification and provide that to the CBAC.
We have
Mr. Alex Shapiro with Hines.
Hi, everyone. Alex Shapiro, Project Manager with Hines. Thanks for having us. We are committed to targeting LEED certification for the project, as was documented within the RFP. Some developments, we go for energy certification. We've had more Energy Star ratings than any other developer in the country. As you know, we're also targeting mass timber construction here, which is highly sustainable. From an operational perspective, our firm has a national goal of having net zero carbon emissions, net zero operating carbon by 2040. And so we have to develop hyper efficient buildings to achieve that goal. And we're going to do that here as well.
Just a follow-up question. Wouldn't you already be meeting LEED Silver standards with your construction?
We typically target LEED for all of our projects nationwide.
LEED accredited, like LEED certified or LEED Silver?
I can get back to you on that. I'm not certain.
Because the LEED Silver is not that difficult to achieve typically. Like LEED is pretty easy. Silver is a little bit harder, but it gets more difficult when it's like gold and, above. But LEED Silver, platinum. It doesn't seem like it would be beyond these types of sustainability strategies to get certified as LEED Silver.
I think it's reasonable. Let me just talk to one of our construction managers who knows the technicalities better than I do.
So for the motion that Ruth is proposing, I think we would like to just have LEED Silver as the standard.
Where did you stop, Ms. Dr. Whitney?
Right here, this, all the way down, and I stopped at this, right there.
Green Building Council. Okay, thank you.
And I think you weren't actually going to register it as LEED Silver. You're just going to meet the standards of LEED Silver, I remember.
Correct. We're going to target LEED for all of the projects on site is how we worded it.
But LEED certified, like you're actually going to have a plaque that says it's LEED certified, or are you just going to meet those criteria and not actually pay to have it registered?
What is the requirement, the guidelines say? Does it say LEED certified?
The guidelines say LEED standards, and the reason we haven't put that into the guidance document as an actual requirement, we have, when we were going through the various options that were included in the guidance document, we had talked to a lot of developers, and they all had stated, very similar to Committee Member Mueller, that yes, they do design their buildings to LEED Silver or even higher. However, it is very expensive to have them come out, the Green Buildings Council, and look at your building to put a plaque on it. And so developers had told us, we have no problem designing to LEED Silver. Our issue is writing a check to an organization to come tell us that it's LEED Silver. So our language has been written to the LEED Silver standards, not necessarily going to get that certification to have the plaque on your building. And that we would do the verification of meeting those LEED Silver standards by our own building department.
All right, so go ahead.
I was just going to say, it would be helpful for me to hear a little bit more about, because the guidance document allows for alternative options. So, and I've talked to a lot of developers too that say, as I think Carrie said, LEED is pretty standard these days. LEED Silver is a little bit harder. Maybe this is better than what they're proposing with LEED. But I don't know enough to understand that. It would be helpful to have a conversation with someone who really understands that and say, yeah, this meets it, or this is better than what LEED would be. But I don't know that. I can't make a determination about that.
Did the city do any comparison, or would you say this is better or as good as, or you don't know?
I don't know. I do know that Heinz team has been working with our Office of Sustainability and Resilience, as well as our director there. I would be happy to talk to her tomorrow, get some information, and circle back to the committee.
Alex, I have a question. So are there equivalent green building standards that are actually higher and better than LEEDs?
The truth of the matter is that they measure different things. Some are energy efficiency in the materials in construction. Some measure how close you are to transportation hubs. Others measure how efficient your light bulbs are. So they measure different things and they weight those individual items differently. Now, for the exact technicalities, if you give me a day or two, we could send you that information.
Can you talk a little bit too about the timber? Because I've heard some criticism that there's going to be stick-built buildings.
Yeah.
So can you clarify the construction method so that we can clarify that for people?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Heinz invented a technology called mass timber construction. And the difference between mass timber and the kind of stick frame construction that was referenced earlier is really how it's constructed. Mass timber sequesters carbon over its life cycle. You can picture a commercial loft office building, but instead of being developed at the turn of the century. It has great air quality, great light, doesn't have creaky elevators, has nice restrooms, etc. That's the kind of aesthetic we're trying to recreate, and it's hyper efficient.
I will say I've toured when it was first opened years ago, the first timber building that you all built in Minneapolis. And it is the next generation in terms of building materials. And it's hurricane resistant, it's earthquake resistant, and it's renewable, which is pretty impressive. It's much better than concrete in terms of sustainability. And Lee doesn't even think of that as a possibility, but it's above and beyond what LEED would say in terms of building materials. And Heinz kind of pioneered this technology.
Thank you. And we're excited. This will be the second one we're breaking ground on in the state, with the first being in Fort Lauderdale. That's happening this month.
So that's kind of why I don't want to just cut this off at the silver leads, because if there are other equivalent alternatives that, like this type of building, then we need to be able to give them some flexibility as long as it's energy efficient and meets the sustainability goals.
But the timber construction that you're talking about would count for LEED points. It'd be part of the LEED scorecard.
In terms of the technicalities, again, for LEED and Energy Star, if I may get back to you, I don't know the answer to that question.
I think in regards to Whitney, for your motion, do you want them to see if they could leave that as LEED silver?
Well, in their materials, I saw they used, was it something star?
Energy Star.
Energy Star, yeah, quite a bit. But you didn't, you had all these awards, but you didn't have anything for the LEED awards. So, and that's our requirement. So I'm just asking them to, meet our requirement.
I just want to clarify, maybe we don't want to allow for Energy Star. We want LEED silver.
Got it.
So I'm not a construction guru. So all of this didn't necessarily go over my head, but I have questions. So you've identified 9 sustainability strategies. And of the 9, you're saying it's a standard. Are you saying that these are equivalent or potentially better than the LEED silver standard, so that I can fully understand?
Yeah, if you may, which 9 are you referencing?
So under right there, it says 9 sustainability strategies have been identified, and then the 9 are listed.
They're all different things. They're about different issues.
Correct. They're about different issues.
So it doesn't relate to the LEED standard.
So it doesn't relate to it at all.
Well, issue number 2, for example, optimizing renewable energy and building efficiency. That would directly relate to a LEED or Energy Star certification.
Okay.
However, restoring and protecting Booker Creek and downstream water, that's a completely different thing.
LEED would never specify that.
Correct. LEED is really about the built environment.
Okay, so then I have questions. If we're saying that's what we're looking for, then I would have wanted to see the 9 strategies directly relate to what that standard is gonna provide. But I agree, not chopping it off, because if there is a standard that is better than the LEED silver, then let's not minimize what we can get potentially.
Are you offering anything better than the LEED standard? Silver standard?
I would say we can come back to you. I want to give you all the information on the different standards, the different certifications, and then we could talk about different options.
Okay, so here's my request. I see you, Chair. I would like to be educated. I'm not you, because this is your job. I'm so sorry. Brian, if you can send me information on this standard. And then what I would like at our next meeting is I would like to see how the developer is matching up to that standard. Okay, Chair Fix-Sanders.
Thank you. My only concern and question for that, which is why I would support what Dr. Whitney is asking for, is because when you read it, it says standards developed by the U.S. Green Building Council unless an alternate and equivalent green building standards and resiliency measures are proposed in the community benefit impact report. That says to me that I already know that I can find an alternative and an equivalent green building, so I really don't have to look for the current LEED silver standards if I don't want to. That word unless can automatically disqualify the LEED silver standards expectations that we're expecting and looking for. So if that word unless was restructured to say something more definitive that LEED silver standards would be looked for first, and then if not attainable. Because I understand what you're saying, Chair Matthews, but I truly do understand what Dr. Whitney is clarifying, because that unless says you really don't have to look at LEED silver standards because you already know you can find an alternative or a equivalent green building standard. And so why just go ahead and start there? You know, why do I have to look for LEED silver standards?
So does lead the industry recognize superior standard? Again, I don't know. I'm a social worker, so I don't know.
LEED is one of the big stamps of approval, if you will, on environmentally and energy efficiency rating for the commercial building sector.
All right, so then I want to shift back to Dr. Whitney's motion. If you're saying that they are the lead. Okay. All right, so we have a motion on the floor. Did you want to say something, Attorney D? You leaned in.
Yeah, I'm just thinking back to the drafting of this language, because this is taken from also the change to the ordinance. And it's just, I think, important to note that LEED is certainly the legacy standard and in this arena, but other things have emerged. There's other standards that have emerged that don't also require you to pay as much money for the plaque. There's the green globes. There's other things out there that achieve much, if not all, of the same things that LEED does. So when we were drafting this, it was to acknowledge that we're here for the sustainable building, not the plaque on the building necessarily. And if you can demonstrate to the standard, that's put there, that you can get there through a different methodology, then the city's going to be happy about that. That doesn't, so.
Because it does say that unless alternative or equivalent.
So
It was to acknowledge the emergence of these different organizations that provide similar levels of certification.
So what would so U.S. Green Building Council at minimum, LEED silver standards at minimum, and then that unless alternate and equivalent would not be the first choice each and every time. That's, if we want to make sure, if the LEED is the industry standard, but we want to make sure it's not minimized, because all of us might not be here 10, 15, 20 years from now.
And LEED probably won't be the standard.
Yeah, and LEED might not be the standard. So LEED standards at minimum developed by the U.S. unless alternate, and then I would be comfortable with that.
But this is already the CBA's language, right?
Correct. The
Yeah,
language
we're
on the
just-
left is
yeah,
the
we're
guidance
just-
document.
So we can't change this as a ad hoc committee.
We certainly
We could recommend.
make recommendations
But we
to
could,
it.
so then we gotta recommend, and it's gotta go back to,
We have quite a bit to recommend, so let's add this to the recommendation.
okay, and we're gonna get this done by next week.
So Dr. Whitney,
I'm not here next
are
week.
you open to amending your motion with the language that Chair Vic Sanders has recommended?
Or accepting a friendly amendment.
Yeah, I'm always willing to take a friendly amendment.
All righty, so
But
Who
he's gotta-
seconded?
we haven't had a second.
Oh, we haven't had, okay.
So we have a motion on the floor, seeking a second with that motion.
Second.
All right, so we have a
Well,
second.
Second to with the friendly amendment or
friendly amendment.
of your language?
So you're saying after standards, LEED silver standards, putting at minimum,
At minimum.
that's all you're adding?
Mm-hmm.
Is the one you're worried about the Energy Star?
Yeah, I don't think the Energy Star is anywhere close to LEED.
Right.
Yeah.
And, the point system for LEED, to get certified is 26 to 32 points, and you have to meet these different categories, which are described here. And so you need to have a certain number of points to get silver. You need 33 to 38. So if we say we need a minimum of LEED silver, they can get 33 to 38 points from these various strategies, but then it ensures a standard for the process. So I think that's an appropriate way to handle it.
At minimum with that friendly amendment. All right, so we have a motion, we have a second. Any other comments, thoughts? All right, all those in favor?
Roll call.
Oh God. Roll call.
So, a question.
Yes.
So that means we're Xing off we're saying that what Heinz Race has proposed is not adequate, or we are not.
We're
accepting it?
keeping it. We're just adding at minimum.
No. But we're saying our job is to say, does this meet what we as the guidance document says? So what is that saying about what they're recommending?
I feel like I don't have enough information to say if it meets that yet. Like, I
Right,
think
which is what
I
we
prefer
really
to wait
should be
until
saying, what
next
we're working
week.
on,
Yeah, for this one, have them come back and say, this is why it meets LEED silver, or it doesn't because we chose these three things that are not contemplated by LEED silver, but we think they're more important for this project. Okay, let's talk about that. I do think the 9 things are a little bit vague, like optimizing renewable energy. What does that mean? You put in better like LED light bulbs, or I mean, I just think you need a little bit more clarity about what this actually means to know either it meets LEED or it doesn't, and it doesn't because there's a good reason for it not to. They're doing something better or different or higher or something just better. So I'm okay changing the language here for us as we're contemplating this, but I think I'm not ready to sign off and say this meets it because the 9 things are fairly vague at this point. I think we need more clarity from the team on what those actually are.
Because our job is to say, these are the standards and is what they propose in meeting this.
Correct.
Okay.
So far I've checked everything and now we're at this one. I'm like, I'm not ready to check it.
All right, Attorney D.
Yeah, just a point of information in terms of changing, accepting the standard that will be in the benefits agreement. A lot of this won't know it till you're at permitting. When you come in with building design, and then that's when you actually start implementing the things that you can get points for. So having the standard in the agreement ensures that it's going to be the benchmark against which permits and inspections are ultimately going to be assessed against. So just kind of, I think there's a little nuance there.
And isn't it true? I mean, as this goes forward, 20 years, the technologies that we have today will improve. So the standard kind of reins them into an overall what you need to meet. But to your point of like specifying would be a little hard because we can't predict the future.
I think that's true. But we could know what their plans are today and if those meet their criteria. But you're right, 15 years from now, who knows?
We're going to have better.
We'll have flying
Think about,
cars.
yeah, exactly.
The way.
Okay, so to honor the fidelity of the motion, we have a motion, we have a second. Any other thoughts or comments in regards to it?
To be clear, we're just changing our expectations of the guidance document. We're not saying necessarily that we think that they have passed that until we
Right.
have more information. Okay, then that's fine. Yeah, okay.
All right. So roll call.
Roll call. Whitney,
Ruth, yes.
You said your name?
Neeson,
Yes.
Campbell,
Yes.
Mueller,
Yes.
Reeser,
Yes.
Wallington,
Yes.
Council Chair Fixanders,
Yes.
Chair Matthews,
Yes.
Vice Chair Mathis.
Yes.
Motion passes, a not unanimous vote.
All right, thank you. All right, Brian.
All right. And just as council chair had started to say, I just want to speak real quickly on just the overall process. This is the second project that we've had go through the CBA. We knew after the first one, we needed some changes. I know the committee is going to have a lot of thoughts on whether it's the guidance document, the process, the information, ways that we can continue to make this a stronger process. So we do anticipate holding at some point after the vote a debriefing meeting with the committee members to just say, what are your suggestions as it relates to the guidance document, as it relates to this process? So we can continue to refine it and make sure that we're making this as successful as we can. So I just, as you go through this, document those, kind of jot down your notes as it relates to this overall process, because we certainly want that feedback. And we fully expect that we'll be engaging with City Council to further refine this as we take this process through.
Brian, I would just say, I do think, and I don't know if Ruth and Bruce would agree, and I know Chair Fig Sanders also participated as an ad hoc member last time, but it has been much better than last time already. Like it's the process a lot less convoluted and a lot more simple and easy to understand what we're actually doing. So thank you for that.
Thank you. So next is the developer will coordinate with the Office of Sustainability and Resilience to plant a similar number of trees as removed on the project site. They have been working with the office to coordinate these efforts. Then in this next section, the green section, they must select one of these. We have filled in every single category in which they have reflected something, but by the guidance document, they're obligated to do at a minimum one. So the guidance document states they must construct or contribute to the development of new affordable and or workforce housing. Hines Rays has committed to 1,200 units, 600 on-site, 600 off-site, which is 20% of the total housing proposed for the project. Those residences will have 500 units at 120 AMI or less, 100 units at 100% AMI or less, 300 units at 80% AMI or less, and finally 300 units at 60% AMI or less.
I have a motion.
Oh, thank you, Ms. Ruth. Go ahead.
It got passed out to everybody when you, it says at the top, suggestions for possible CBA motions. Changes are welcome by Ruth Whitney. And it's got 4 different parts that need to be voted on. You can see it says, everybody got their copy?
Yes, ma'am.
Affordable housing defined as 30%, 80% or less than AMI. I move the CBA, I'll say aye. I move that Raise Hines increase the number of 300 affordable units at 80% AMI, which is currently 5% of the total 6,000 residential units. The increase is from 300 to 600 affordable housing units at 80% AMI. This is an increase by 5%, from 5% to 10% of the total units. The second part says, I move also an increase from 300 to 600 affordable units at 60% AMI. This is an increase from 5% to 10% of the total units. This increase brings the total of affordable housing to 1,200 units and a total of 20% of the 600 residential units. And the workforce unit defined as between 80 and 20% AMI. I move for a decrease of workforce housing from 600 units to 300 units at 100% AMI. This is a decrease from 10% to 5% of the total units. The numbers are, it's the reason I typed it out is the numbers, you know, you need to look at them. And we've talked about this a couple of meetings already. I know it's maybe hard on the developer over there, but our city is, all our citizens are saying we need more affordable. So I've doubled the number of affordable and decreased the number of workforce.
So I would request, because I'm not going to vote on something that was just put before me, so substantially involving determining how the finances work to get to where we are. If this is something that we could get information on as to what that impact would be, because there are certain level of subsidies that are given for the different AMI percentages. So we just can't say, I want to take 120% and move it down to all 80% AMI without knowing what the numbers are. And me trying to get clarification for myself, wanting to understand that. So is Mr. Corbett still here? Oh, me trying to get an understanding for myself. Now I understand that these numbers pretty much came from administration.
The numbers as provided were what we agreed to after 9 to 10 months of negotiation.
That's 15, it goes up 3.
That's tough. So
Yeah.
what I've done is just take the numbers that were, in their proposal and change them some.
So you're asking them to increase by 300 units from 1,200 to 1,500?
Well, I did increase that, but I didn't take, I did take away some from the workforce. They had more for the workforce, and I took away some to try not to be too harsh on their needs.
So, I mean, what I'll say from my time as neighborhood affairs administrator and working through workforce and affordable housing deals, what I'm understanding, the proposal is to increase the units by 300, but also increase the number of units from the 80% and the 60% and below, basically to double them, which would be a very significant financial impact. I would certainly want to, I'm not sure if that's feasible under the current structure of the deal, but I can assure you, without getting specific into the numbers, adding 300 units and changing the AMIs, that drastically is going to significantly impact the deal.
I would say so, and not to mention the fact that all the other amenities that's going with that, without, I would need to see what that cost impact would be. I would need a better understanding of what the dollars, the state and federal funds that would be applied to this, what they require. I would have loved to have seen all of it at 80%, but realistically, in the economics that we're dealing with right now, that would not be a realistic thing to do. And not to mention at this juncture of where we are with this, what would be the financial impact? Are we willing to give up something for this? Because the bill at 80% AMI, I don't, where anybody from Hines can give us that. I would not vote on this today because I don't have enough to say. I want to go add 300 extra, and plus that's not up on us because we still have to talk to the county because this is going to impact their dollars as well. This is substantial.
Mr. Corbett, is there a way for you to do, thank you, Chair Vic Sanders, is there a way to do a snapshot of the level of financial impact this would have on this project in between now and next Tuesday? Just curious.
We could give you a general idea of what the impact, because we would need to calculate the impact of the additional units as well as the shift in AMI, with the understanding that every unit that we shift, particularly in the standalone buildings, that affordability is forever. So that impact is going to exponentially be increased.
And also if that's also an impact on the county side as well, just a snapshot. I don't know if you can even.
It would certainly impact the subsidy that's required for sure. So that's going to impact all partners.
Well, then, if you're going to do that, consider just dropping altogether the workforce.
I don't think that's going to happen.
So I see, yes.
So I looked at the city's numbers here for what they consider AMI per household size between 1 and 8. And by dropping everything above 80%, we're essentially leaving market rate in that area, because that's what would be left for all our RN nurses, essentially.
Talking about earlier about what the wages would potentially be for these jobs that are going to be created. And they're not enough to pay for anything more than 80%. So, I mean, you could cut out the 100 and 120, or you could leave it in there, but it's not affordable to the people who are going to be working on this project. And I just think it doesn't make any sense to say it's affordable, but it's not affordable to the people that are going to be working at the jobs that are created by that.
Was that a requirement? Is that this was housing only for those working those 3,700 jobs? I didn't think so.
I'm not saying it's a requirement. I'm just making a point that if we're talking about what's affordable to people, it's not affordable to the people who are going to be working at the jobs that are provided by this project. So where are those people supposed to live? That's my question. It's not, it's just a philosophical question.
I mean, I would only add that for any of them, even the 120 is going to be less than anything that you would be able to get right now downtown, unless it was a dedicated income restricted property. Particularly downtown, 120 is not market rate. I think if you've looked at what you pay downtown, it's close to $2,000 for a studio. So this would be certainly less than market rate, and I believe it provides impact to individuals across the strata of income levels, to include some making a little more with the 7,000 jobs that are created, be affordable to some of those jobs, but still providing impact for those who would be working in some of the lower paying jobs. It's spread out, but I wouldn't categorize 120 as market rate downtown. In other places in the city, that might be true.
Yeah, I think this whole discussion is focusing on downtown, which I don't think this should have much to do with downtown, because to afford something downtown, you're gonna have to go way up, and that's not the point. That's not the point of the community benefits agreement language. As a matter of fact, the point is for the citizens who are cost burdened in their housing, and it's basically for those who make less than the median income. That's the purpose of the community benefits agreement legislation. At least it certainly was. I was one of the people who fought so hard to get it passed, and that's who we were aiming at. We were not aiming at a professional who might make $175,000 and they still feel like they can't quite live downtown because downtown's so damned expensive or something. That's not what this program is about. So the program, I think, should not be worried about the fact that even at 120% downtown, you can't afford something. Well, that's another problem. And maybe it's a problem, but it's not a problem for the CBA or as a piece of legislation or for us. We're trying to deal with the needs of the citizens who are the least advantaged, most disadvantaged in the state, in the city. If they can't live downtown, they're going to live somewhere else. We've got to provide the kind of housing so that they can live somewhere. So I think we should get the focus off of downtown, forget about downtown on this stuff. And I do think 80% and below is where we need to be talking about. Rather than, it's not going to work downtown. Even 120% is not going to work downtown. Well, so what? I mean, that's not what this is about.
If I may add, the project is downtown, and we're requiring that those units be downtown. So we can't separate the fact that this particular development is in downtown St. Pete, and we're requiring that at least 600 of those units be at the development. So I'm not sure how you separate the fact that it's downtown, because that's the place that we're contemplating the development.
Bruce, are you suggesting we just say you can do it any place in the city? It doesn't have to be on the site. We would give them the ability to put these units anywhere in St. Petersburg?
I'm not sure I understand the question, but I thought that's kind of already the case, that one can build wherever they want to in the city. They don't have to build
I think
downtown.
if I remember correctly, half have to be built on site and half have to be built any place else in the city.
Right.
No, it's not half, it's 1/3. That's what the second motion is, or no.
Oh, no,
Hold
that's
on,
your, yeah.
Hold on, before,
I thought 600 had to be built on
It does.
site.
It
Am I right?
is,
I'm
Vice
right?
Chair. You're right.
Okay.
You're right.
1,200 units total under 120 AMI at the various levels that have been provided. 600 of those must be constructed on the site itself.
That
600
does
of those
change
can
the
be
dynamic. If
constructed
they can go any
elsewhere
place in the city, that does change the dynamic. But I thought we wanted to put some housing on this site. Like, that seems like a reasonable expectation.
And the entire site's considered downtown? Really? Really?
The gas plant site, yes.
All of it?
It's in the downtown CRA, the in-town CRA.
Yeah, and it all has DC zoning, which stands for downtown center.
What I read in the term sheet was that what was going to be on site was affordable housing was 100 of the 80% of the 300 total units. That's 1/3, not half. And 100 of the 60% AMI out of the 300, which would be another 1/3.
So that is a requirement to state that every one of these AMI levels must be represented on the site. It can't just be at 100% or 120 and they take the 60% and 80% and do all 600 of those units somewhere else in the city and just do workforce housing on the site. So you are correct. There are minimums, and those are just minimums. They can exceed that, but they must do at every single AMI level 60, 80, 100, and 120 must be represented actually on the gas plant site itself, with the remainder of those units that can be built elsewhere, provided there's at least 600 total on the site. It's just a way to ensure that every single income level is represented actually at the development itself.
James,
So
I'm sorry.
I was gonna go back to Mr. Corbett. So with the knowledge of all that's been said, I want to go back to what the impact will look like. And I think I said next week Tuesday, but I think we probably need to have it before next week Tuesday, so we're prepared for Tuesday. I agree with Brooks in that if we're saying that we're cutting out the majority of people that I call friends that are in a struggle situation right now with housing. So I would love to see what that impact looks like in dollars and cents.
Could I ask it? I think it's to go along with that. So you all spent 9 months, 10 months in this negotiation. I think the city's interest has always been to get as much affordable housing as possible. And, Rob Gertis's job prior to his current job was focused almost solely on affordable workforce housing issues in neighborhood and community development. It would be helpful, I think, for us to understand, how did you get to these numbers? How did you negotiate? And it doesn't have to be a long element, but I just think it's hard for us to come in and at the very last minute say we want to change everything that you spent 10 months negotiating if we don't understand your efforts to try to get to that point. And that's not to say that we can't make recommendations, suggestions. That's our job, but we should do it based in the knowledge of the efforts that you've already undertaken to try to get as much affordable housing into this deal as possible, and what some of those trade-offs were, land value costs, or less money for this, or less focus on X, Y, and Z, or whatever. I just think it'd be helpful for us to understand the negotiations you already went through. This project is different than the Moffett project, where the city had not already undertaken some of those negotiations. You all have already spent almost a year negotiating, and I think we need to honor your efforts by understanding the lengths that you've gone to get us to this point. Doesn't mean we can't change it or make recommendations, but we should at least understand the efforts that you all have gone to get us to this point.
Thank you for that, Jason. What I would say is that in the 9 or 10 months that we've been negotiating, it's hard to separate. We're talking about a few things, but I would say all of these factors were based on the 23 guiding principles from the RFP. It was always understood from when Mayor Welch restarted the RFP, there were several things that he wanted to accomplish. One, fulfilling the promises that were not kept from gas plant. Obviously, affordable and workforce housing was extremely important. But there are other factors that we haven't talked about today. For example, office space. So some of you may or may not know that there has not been a new singly built office building in the city of St. Petersburg since the 1990s. The reason why that has not happened, particularly downtown, is that if you're a developer and you buy a 2-acre parcel of land, kind of going back to our earlier conversation related to highest and best use, and you have the option to build an office building, or you can build a market rate condo. For profit purposes, you're going to build a market rate condo every single time, which is why you see, or market rate multifamily. So if you look around downtown, that case study is proven, you see no shortage of market rate condos and multifamily units. Part of the negotiation as far as filling promises that were not kept is we believe by creating new office space that is going to attract companies, which will attract jobs. Part of the trade-off to me Obviously, we want to make sure that we provide workforce and affordable housing, but I don't think that that is the way that we get our residents to a better place economically. We can't build enough affordable housing to build us out of this issue that we're in. We have to create opportunities for people to get better paying jobs, which means bringing more companies, bringing more jobs. And the office space, for example, does that. The reason why Raise Hines are able to do the office space right now, it's a little over $1 million, 1 million square feet proposed in the development. The reason why they're able to do that is because they take some of the trade-offs on what they're able to do with the market rate, some of the other things. So it's all tied in together. But what we negotiated, we believed, was a good deal for our citizens as it relates to making sure there are opportunities for individuals at various income levels to be able to live on site, but also making sure that there were opportunities for individuals at various income levels to have an opportunity off site, having retail, having hotel space. But to me, most importantly, something that has not happened in several years is creating office space, which if the Rays and Hines are building office space, it's because they intend to occupy it with tenants. Those tenants are going to have to hire employees. And to me, that's a community benefit that we haven't talked about. That's huge. It's not going to necessarily show up on the ledger from the city's perspective, but if we are bringing in companies that are paying a livable wage, then you don't necessarily need a house or a unit that's at 60% of AMI because you can afford 100% of AMI. So I say all that to say all of that stuff factored into how we got to where we are. Would I have loved to get 100% of the units at 80% of AMI? Absolutely. But I certainly wouldn't be able to do that and also get the over 1 million square feet of office space and some of the other things and the $50 million in intentional equity. So this was the best mix that we were able to negotiate in the time period that we had. And we feel confident that this will be a benefit for all the citizens of St. Pete. I know that's a long answer, but I just kind of want to give you an idea of everything that factored into the conversation as we negotiated this deal. But it was never housing or just this or just land price. It was a combination of things. And how could we get a mix that we thought was best for our residents?
And if I can just add one point to that, because I think Administrator Corbett really summarized that beautifully. But we did go in very clearly with the intention of maximizing the opportunities for affordable and workforce housing. And to that end, that is evidenced in the term sheet because there was an increase from, I believe it was 859 units in the original proposal that was submitted to the city from Raise Hines to get them up to 1,200 affordable and workforce housing units. So it was something that the city had pushed very hard for. It is something that Mayor feels very strongly about, the administration, city council, of course, our community feels very strongly about. And I do think you see that reflected in the term sheet that we were able to have a fairly substantial increase up to 20% of the overall units being affordable and workforce housing.
Okay. Yes, ma'am.
I just want to add on to what you're talking about because I think that that's an important component and it is something we have not really delved into, which is the office development. And I do believe that we need more offices in St. Pete, and Hines has a reputation of being the leading office developer in the United States. They have a very strong reputation, and they have a reputation of bringing the market. They have a reputation of building the building and then bringing the tenants that are, high level Class A type office space tenants. So they have a reputation of delivering that product in a good way. And I know that St. Pete needs to develop their office market. We know with Orange Station, we're getting some new offices, Class A office, because we don't have Class A office space. So I understand what you're saying. I think it is a benefit. And I think as a panel, what is difficult for us is there's different components of community benefits. There's the 50 million, and then there's the housing, there's offices, there's the museum, there's the Booker Hall, and there's no real understanding of what the value of those different components are. It's like a black box. And I think that's why there's a lot of concern in the community because nobody really knows what is the value of the office, what is the value of the housing. And we're kind of in this like trust us, statement. Like we spent a lot of time on it, and you should just trust us, but we don't really know what the value is. And I think that more information we could get on what kind of contributions the developer is offering with those types of products, I think it would help the public feel more assured that they are getting a return, because right now we don't know what the value of that is.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Commissioner Mueller. I think there's a lot of ways that we could express value, and that is partly what makes this process a little difficult, because I could tell you that an office job is worth $100,000, but I would assure you that it would be worth a lot more to the person who was in that job and was able to build their career and grow with the company. So while I don't, I'm not sure, we can continue to have conversations. And I would say from my perspective, it was always, and certainly Brian and Administrator Gertis, as we were negotiating this deal, it was always our perspective to get the best deal for our taxpayers. Could we get one more unit? Could we have gotten another unit at 80% of AMI? Possibly. But in the interest of where we started, to Brian's point, not only did we increase the number of workforce and affordable units to 1,200, at the same time, we bumped the price of the land. And again, we've had a lot of conversations about land value, but Ray's Hines offered the highest price, the highest value for the land. So this was a open solicitation for anybody to come in to say, what would you like to offer the city of St. Petersburg based on these specific requests? And the team that Mayor Welch selected by far was the highest amount. But not only were we able to take them as the highest offer, we were able to increase that amount by 105,000. I can tell you up to 105 million. I can tell you, to get to this point, and I want the public to know this, this was not a situation where we were just like, here you go, and walk away. There are these conversations, and Brian and the rest of the Ray's Hines team can tell you that these were very intense conversations. All of us at some point probably felt like we wanted to walk away, but I am confident as a lifelong city resident and someone that cares a lot about our city that we negotiated a good deal. Could we? I mean, could it be better? I guess one could argue that. Could we, give you an exact figure on how much this job is worth versus how much this unit is worth, versus something else? That would probably be a difficult exercise. But I believe what we're presenting today is far better, far superior than what exists. That's.
I mean, sadly, it always will be somewhat subjective. Otherwise, you could just put it into an AI computer and be like, yeah, good deal, bad deal. So there is some subjective element to it, but I think it's helpful for us to we've had a lot of conversations, rightly so, a lot of conversations about the affordable housing piece. And I think we all have some concerns about elements of that part. But I think it is thinking about it in total. It's actually having a major hotel will be a huge benefit to the city in terms of exogenous spending of people coming here who are not coming here now because we don't have that caliber of a hotel. We have really high end at the Vinoy. We've got limited service, but having a nice hotel, that's a huge benefit too in terms of new money coming into our city. And there's a lot of subjective things like that that is difficult to quantify. And I think one of the goals for us over this month and a week is to try to wrap our head around that and say, yeah, is this fair? How can we improve it? How can we make it better without threatening the sort of broad contours of the deal that you all spent 10 months negotiating? And that's, to me, that's how I'm trying to think about it.
Is it not fair to just say, from a numbers perspective, that Ray's Hines' contribution to this is nearly $6 billion? Are they not the ones that are going to be spending $6 billion to build the office space, to do the development that'll bring hotels and things to this area?
Yeah, the investment in the 60 plus or minus acre development is approximately $6 billion. And that is complete, that investment is completely coming from the Ray's Hines. The only investment the city has in the 60 plus or minus acres is $130 million for infrastructure that we will then own: streets, street lights, sidewalks, stormwater, wastewater. All the other investment as it relates to the 60 acres will be through the Ray's Hines.
Okay,
Can
so.
I ask a question?
Yes.
Sorry. I appreciate that Raise Hines is bringing a lot of money to the development, but I think we also need to remember what the public is contributing to the development, which is the land, which is a significant contribution. And that's why we're here. But the other part is the 130 million in utility infrastructure, which is substantial. I mean, it's a lot. It ends up being more money than they're paying us for the land. And I know that the land the value is reduced by what they're adding to the project, but nonetheless, it's the utility infrastructure is 130 more million, and what we're being paid is 105. So we're giving them more money in utilities than they're paying us for the land. So, and we're even giving them credit for the 53 million that they're coming up with for infrastructure. So I think we have to look at it as a whole. That's all I want to say. And on the housing, I think it's clear from this motion, we're all under the impression that there's 6,000 units. That's the target. The minimum is 5,000 units.
The minimum is 4,800.
4,800.
The minimum
3,800.
for market rate is 3,800.
3,800.
Correct.
But
For
the
market rate.
for the workforce and affordable, the minimum is the same. It's 1,200. There's no reduction.
I know that 1,200 is 1,200, but it's a total of 38 plus 12.
5.
And we were thinking 6, a lot of us were thinking 6. That's just what I wanted to bring up. I think a lot of,
Percentages are not correct.
well, I think they're representative of what we're saying. The percentage is still somewhat representative of what we're trying to say, but I'm saying that there's an impression in the public and within our committee that there's 6,000 units when there's really 5,000 in total, 3,800 market rate, 1,200 workforce and affordable.
There's 5,000 in total minimum required.
Minimum.
They absolutely have to do the 5,000. But obviously, if it's a successful development, they're going to do more. I mean, it would only be in their interest to build out the site as best they can, because that's going to increase their bottom line. So I have no reason to believe that they would not try to build out to the target, because it's tied to their best interest.
Chair Matthews, if I may, just very quickly, because I think Committee Member Mueller brings up a very important point, actually two very important points. As it relates to the infrastructure, yes, that is the public investment in this portion of the project, separate from the stadium, really is that $130 million infrastructure. But by our own engineering estimates, it's going to be closer to 180 or 200. And that, as we have seen in the construction industry, has just continues to increase. So we don't know what it's going to be potentially 10, 15 years from now. And one of the things that the mayor and administration were very sure of when negotiating this was that we are not going to be liable for any of those overruns. So if this comes in at 250 or $300 million for infrastructure, our liability in this is capped at 130 million. It is absolutely a very extensive public participation in the project, but it's also been done in a way that whatever comes in the future, that is really on the expense of Raise Hines. And if another developer had proposed something there, of course, the $200 million estimate for infrastructure is based on Raise Hines' plan. It would be different for someone else, but we don't know if they would look to the city to put in 100% of that infrastructure or not. So that is just a consideration as it relates to that 130. Yes, it is very significant, but it's also capped. And we don't know what that alternative would be, if it would be capped, and if we would be expected to pay the full 180 to 200 million. The other point, and I appreciate you bringing it up, is the difference between the minimum and the target. Certainly, going into this, we understand no one thought office space was going to be where it is today in 2019. COVID changed a lot of that, and we see it continue to have changes. We don't know what the next 20 years are going to bring, and so Raise Hines needs that flexibility to understand the market is going to change over the next 20 years. Maybe the housing market will cool and the office market will heat up. That's why we have those minimums to say, these are the things, as Administrator Corbett identified, that kind of make this development what it is, this mix of use. We need to protect that, but we also want to maximize the development. And we fully assume that Ray's Hines will as well. And that's why we really have the difference between the target development, which is what we are all hoping they achieve, but the minimum to say, understanding things are going to change over the next 20 years. And the unit count they put forward today may not be the unit count we wind up with in 20 years from now. Building in that flexibility while still getting some assurances for city council, the administration, and our community of having that right mix in order to make this a vibrant community.
All right, so
Can I ask about the music hall, the Booker Music Hall? Is that being constructed with this project, the performing arts?
The music venue is being constructed with the project. I believe it's scheduled in phase 1.
Because it has like square footage for entertainment, but there's no like specific about like what it is or how big it is or anything like that. It's just kind of.
Well, I've been looking at this too, and in your impact report on the third page, you know, it says that they're going to build the concert view venue and also the African American Museum. But in the term sheet, which we don't, I got it off our website, but most people may not even have read it. It says that those are minimum. In other words, they're omitted from the minimums. So in other words, it's possible that if you don't go by the target development and go by the minimum, there will be no concert venue in that 100,000 square feet entertainment space. And it spells it out that it is the concert venue in this document, but under the target it's in the target in the term sheet, which is more important than this. It's what really counts. So it's in the target, both that and the African American Museum are in the target, but they're not in the minimum. So it is possible that the completion of this project will be without the African American Museum and without the concert venue.
So, committee member, if I may clarify, in the minimums, we have combined categories for that exact reason of flexibility. It is not excluded from it. They are required to do the music hall. They are required to do the African American Museum. In the term sheet itself, you've got the target development program. It lists out office space, entertainment, commercial space. In the minimum, you will see those blended together. All three categories are listed on one line rather than calling them out individually. That is to provide that flexibility because we know things will change over the 20 years. But those two items that you mentioned are included under both circumstances, whether they do the target or they change that target and only hit their minimums, they are obligated to provide both the museum and the music venue.
I didn't see that anywhere in the term sheet because they are omitted from the minimum. So you wouldn't have to do them.
They're not omitted, they're just captured in a summary of the square footage. So we call it's a more general category for the minimum where we don't specifically call it out. But again, I just want to remind everyone that was the document that we presented to council to explain the path that we were going on. That document is not legally binding. The actual agreement will be clear that the music hall and the museum will be required as a part of the development, whether they do the minimum or the target.
all right, so I want to lean in and say that we started by discussing affordable units. Dr. Whitney made a motion. I do not think that there was a second. I think that we went right into conversation and we still have 2, 3, 4 of what Dr. Whitney wants to bring to this body. So Dr. Whitney, with that understanding and with the desire, I am not prepared if we do a roll call vote to vote for this in a positive way. I need to see the impact. Are you willing to postpone, withdraw until next week when we receive that information to be able to have an educated conversation?
If she doesn't get a second, it fails anyway, whether she's willing or not.
There is no second.
If she doesn't get a second.
Well, I think we went right into questions. I don't think we even moved for a second, and I don't want to necessarily have it fail. I do think it's important to see.
I'm just giving you Robert's rule.
Yes, ma'am. All right. Are you willing to withdraw, ma'am? Dr. Whitney?
Anyone
you
want a second?
I'll give it a second, just so it's on the
There it
agenda.
is. So we have a first and we have a second.
Roll call.
Roll
Yeah,
call.
and by the way, I did ask that this be sent out to all the members of the committee yesterday. That's not much in advance, but it took quite a work to, develop all these categories. And if Michael tells me, our lawyer says that you can't send out emotions in
Motions can
advance.
only be made at the,
Correct.
yeah, it's fundamental.
So I apologize you didn't get to see it before, today.
All right, so we'll move forward with the roll call.
Can we clarify what the motion is?
Well, we're not voting on it, right?
I think we have
Well,
a
you-
second,
you
so now we're gonna
seconded it.
vote.
Yeah.
Now we have to
Well,
vote on it.
we can postpone it.
Okay.
You asked for a postponement.
Exactly.
Well, it's up to you as the movement, Dr.
Okay.
Whitney.
That's,
So if you
that's
would
one
like
of the
to-
reasons I seconded to see if she wanted to postpone or
we
not.
can
So we
postpone.
could actually
Alright.
discuss that.
All right, thank you so
But we've
much.
got to be sure to get some
I
other
think-
things in too.
Just from
next
a
week.
verbiage standpoint, just a withdrawal of the motion is more appropriate.
Right.
Oh, but it's okay to postpone.
No.
Put it on the
Postpone
agenda.
doesn't have a legal effect. If you withdraw the motion, doesn't mean that you can't bring it back up next week.
Right.
Okay, we'll do the legal thing.
So it's a formal withdrawal of your motion, Dr. Whitney.
Yes.
Thank you.
All righty. Thank you.
All right. So again, just to kind of bring us back, they must do one of these. They don't have to do everything. I'm only going to hit on the ones that actually match up. Construct public parking or contribute to new public parking. Raise Hines is committed to 14,000 structured parking spaces on the site. Many of these will be publicly available. They will be shared parking spaces, so it could potentially support an office user during the day. When that office user vacates, they become publicly accessible nights and weekends, as well as the spaces that are dedicated for the stadium itself. Make complete streets and multimodal transit improvements. New transit has been identified along First Avenue South with the Sunrunner BRT. Separated bike lanes will be installed on 16th Street South and Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Street. A bike lane along 13th Street is identified. Furthermore, street design modifications will make the site more accessible and improve pedestrian connectivity and safety. Contribute to the city's recycling program and waterway nourishment. They've identified sustainable waste management and recycling, reduce greenhouse gas emissions, promote sanitation, and create a more livable community. Then we get to the blue section. This is, again, where they must select one of them. They are really three areas where they've kind of matched up. Develop on or off-site public space beyond the code requirements. They've identified 14 acres of open space, which is approximately 16% of the site. Contribute to the development of early childhood programs via the CBA fund. Hines Rays is committed to providing space for early education on site and communicating child care services as a priority to potential tenants and partners. They intend to work with preschools in South St. Petersburg to build capacity and include satellite locations in the historic gas plant district. In addition, Tampa Bay Watch is interested in supporting environmentally focused daycare programming on the site at the Eco Pavilion, and the Boys and Girls Club of Suncoast is interested in supporting after-school opportunities. Contribute to streetscape improvements. This is the additional beyond the $130 million city commitment that relates to infrastructure. So they have committed approximately $50 million to those streetscape improvements. It would essentially be anything needed to complete the infrastructure beyond the $130 million public commitment. Then finally, in the gray area, they must select one out of this. In this particular instance, those were not selected by Rays Hines. However, as the ordinance states, you may propose alternative benefits for consideration that are separate from the guidance document. And that is where Rays Hines has supplemented that section with the $50 million, which would be an M after the $50 million in intentional equity, which goes to support the programs that Mr. Frazier has spoken to previously, such as the $15 million for affordable workforce housing that comes to the city, money for the museum, money to help support business development, apprenticeships, capacity building, et cetera.
I do have a question. So I did review the original proposal. And in the original proposal, if I'm not mistaken, it said that the 50 million was upfront. I'm curious as to why we have now gone to over XYZ amount of time. I don't know who.
Chair Matthews, I think that's probably in the way that it was written.
Okay.
It was never intended, at least from our conversations, that $50 million was upfront. But I think that it was the way maybe that it was delivered gave the impression that it was a $50 million check to the city. But Grace Hines can speak to that, but I don't believe that was ever the intent.
Okay.
May I just ask, but before we sign off on this, I thought that Councilmember Campbell had a really interesting conversation about restorative and what does that mean? And is there a component of the 50 million that goes back to actual people who were displaced from gas plant or descendants of folks who were displaced from gas plant? And if I remember correctly, Ms. Gwen Reese said that that was an interesting conversation. They would go back and talk to the people who she's identified and have a conversation with them. I would just love an update on how that conversation's progressed, if anyone has been able to. I will say the Bloomberg Harvard City Leadership Initiative that's referenced in here that this is based on was a project that Ms. Gwen, I know, worked on with Gypsy Galadriel, Nikki Capehart. I was part of that team. And we did identify these 5 ways of trying to give back to the gas plant. So I'm interested in seeing it now fleshed out of what that actually looks like. We had just come up with 5 broad categories. But I think that idea of providing some sort of benefit directly to people who were impacted significantly has some value. And I'd love to know, it doesn't have to be a fleshed out plan. It was just a conversation we had last week, but sort of what is the current thinking about that and if that's a possibility.
We will certainly follow up with Ms. Reese and see if we can add that to the agenda for next week.
One comment?
Yes, ma'am.
In those last 3 categories, the developer only had to pick one, select one. They selected 3 in one category and several in another. And I want to thank the developer for going beyond what was required and offering more.
Thank you for that, Dr. Whitney. All right, so you have anything else in regards to actions to take or anything of that nature?
No, just finally, the last document that was in your backup materials just was of the CBAC votes and recommendations, just so everyone is on the same page as to what's already occurred. 15% of all hours will be performed by apprentices. 15% of hours worked to be performed by disadvantaged workers. Every contractor and subcontractor shall pay a responsible wage. And then the quarterly reports, which we have in this meeting, superseded as it relates to the city code.
Thank you so much for that. All righty.
Just this one other, we passed it, but it's going back to the 10 to 30% of minority and small businesses. I really would like to recommend that there be some, I know there are not numbers broken out by minority and small business, but I think there needs to be intention there that minority businesses are focused, that there is some intention, because if not, this 10 and 30% is going to go to small businesses. It does now. I've seen it before. And so I think if we're really talking about moving the needle, it has to be intentional. And if you don't want to put a number there, at least some measurements, some thought. What are you doing? How are you doing it? What's the outreach? Those kinds of things.
And thank you for saying that, because some of these things that we're actually discussing as I get into it are city level. This is a partnership, and as the city increases its job pool and upscale and training, that's an effort that should also be discussed at the city level. So we can require Hines to put all these numbers in, but if we don't have the residents living here equipped to do it, they're not going to be able to provide these percentage rates that we're asking them to do. We also have to provide a collaborative piece on the city level to make sure that the people are living here are equipped and skilled as well. Because even if they provide a program, entrepreneurship program or a training program, they're still limited in numbers. So if they impact 20 or 30 people at a time, what is that still going to do for us overall economically, especially when it comes to workforce development? It's not. It has to be a huge, a broader, and I think that's another piece that we're missing in this whole ordeal. We're looking at these documents, but there are so many more moving parts that's gonna go with this. You know, there are so many more moving parts. That's why I don't want us to get so hung up on just what you see right here, because there's no way we're gonna be able to document all the impact that this project is going to bring to the city of St. Petersburg. So I would hate for us to think that this is all we have, because it's not. And I can assure you that the administration and council, we're not going to allow this to be all that you see, because it's not. You know, you have, just like we talk about housing, there's more than one fund or bucket for housing. We provide, you know, throughout, you know, it comes from here, it comes from there, and they put it together. So in the negotiations, I'm believing that those other resources coming from the city took part in the negotiation piece that we don't have access to. And tell me if I'm far-fetched, Mr. Capers and Mr. Corbett, because we do have other areas to pull resources from. So as far as the training and upskilling, the city's gonna have to take a more active role in that. That shouldn't be on this, only on Haynes and this particular project. That we'll never make it if it was all up to Haynes to employ and upskill our residents. So I just want us to just think about, it's a lot bigger than what's on this spreadsheet. There are a lot more players. There's a lot more different wheels that are burning than what's on, turning than what's on this spreadsheet. So I just, you know, I just had to say that because I don't want us to get caught up in some of these documents, because there is some accountability and ownership elsewhere. Thank you.
All right, so I'd like to take a 10-minute break if possible. All right.
Hello, I'm Gabe Ortiz, and this is WEDU Arts Plus. Based out of St. Pete, the Tampa Bay Breakfast Club is a morning radio show about hip-hop life and urban culture. Meet the hosts who inform and empower their listeners.
I'm Jabbar Edman. I go by Mr. Edman. My role, I'm a host and I'm co-founder.
My name is Brother John Muhammad, Your Brother John, YourBrotherJohn.com. And my role on the Tampa Bay Breakfast Club is host or co-host.
I just go by Kiana. Sometimes you may hear the guys call me Q. I may say Q just depending on my personality that day. And I'm the female of the crew. I think I keep balance when you look at the Tampa Bay Breakfast Club. So that's my role.
And I'm Bruce Moore Jr. A lot of people do know Bruce Moore Jr., obviously being born and raised here and going to school here, but there's many more people that know Reno.
St. Pete is small, and so the good things and bad things that come with a small city, everybody knowing each other, of course, would be one of the pluses.
My neighbors were not only just my neighbors, they became my family.
Trying to put that back now, like really getting back to a place where we know our neighbors and we look out for each other. It was a St. Pete that existed, south of Central, and then there was another St. Pete that existed north of Central and downtown. It was a struggle then, and I think it's still, somewhat a struggle for Black people in the city of St. Pete.
Even with every step of progress we make, it's still a struggle to, implement that progress.
Did y'all hear about the weed college, the first cannabis college in
Orlando?
Talk to him, Sean Soprano.
No, yeah, I've been looking at it.
This is serious, y'all.
Over a year ago.
If you got the charges, go and get the degrees, King. You got years of experience, man. It ain't like you come into a classroom with no data.
Elon Musk said that a drug dealer knows how to manage and run a business better.
I can't believe that.
The real facts, man.
I'm all about education. But what I'm saying is that we carry this industry on our backs.
The way we started the Tampa Bay Breakfast Club, Jabbar approached me about what could we do, how can we do something together, and then an opportunity to promote Amendment 4. Amendment 4 is the, voting rights restoration to returning citizens. We were able to negotiate a deal where we got like 30 minutes on the radio at 99 Jams to talk about, Amendment 4 and other local, policies. To returning citizens. We were able to negotiate a deal where we got like 30 minutes on the radio at 99 Jams to talk about, Amendment 4 and other local, policies and politics. Enjoyed it, so we started doing it on Sundays as like a podcast with, at the time, Janet Michelle. She was our co-host, and she, filled that role until she moved. And then we had Carla Bristol, Carla B. She came in for a season. And then Reno was behind the scenes. He was always present because we did organizing together, so he'd come and hang out. And then the things that he was saying off camera was like, man, we might as well just have you on the show.
The negative thoughts that you is thinking about right now, or any particular subject, y'all, just flip it.
Turn problems into opportunities.
Problems are opportunities, man. Big shout out to Sean Soprano.
Real deal, man.
We on the jump board together right now. Just being around people and clearly always talking, I just felt like at least learn something. So as you see that you're not going to shut up, you can have substance to your conversation and not just be labeled somebody who just love to talk.
Really being informative, looking to give the information that isn't readily available in our community.
Multiple meteorologists can look at the same data and come up with a different forecast.
And so now you take those models, take that data and say, okay, based upon all of that,
absolutely,
you might be in between here and there, and that's my know what I'm saying speech. Most recently, after Carla B, transitioned out and went to do other things as well, Kiana, we invited Kiana.
I've been working with the guys for a while outside of this, and they called me to interview. And when I came in to interview that Sunday, after the show, they was like, hey, you need to be a part of the show. And I was like, okay.
I look at it almost like a band and the instruments, but it's just the instrument that we're using is our voices.
My voice is already kind of squeaky. I know my voice can get squeakier.
You have to have your radio voice on and have that vocal control.
I talk lower when I need to calm it down. And when I'm very passionate about it, I slow it down. And because I want you to understand what I'm saying. What's good for the geese is good for the gander. So if you keep it secrets, just know that she can too.
Okay, and see that's why that's why you need it on the Tampa Bay Breakfast Club. You feel? Because you gonna even things out. You know what I'm saying? I was just joking. You know what I'm saying? It was joking.
We just understand power, and in terms of people's attention, because it costs. People's attention costs. That's why it's called pay attention.
We want to present local information right up there with, the trending topics.
One thing that's a common denominator with all of us is that we're all passionate about our people.
For me, what you take from me is that I'm real and I'm passionate about the growth of our people.
The overall goal, I would say, is to have a more informed community around electoral politics, around health, around equity.
It's about the mission of connecting the dots and closing the gaps, inspiring people to see what's possible, and trying to be an example. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing sometime, but you do the best that you can with what you have, and you pray that others will be inspired to join in.
For more info, visit cdatcenter.org/Tampa Bay Breakfast Club.
Oh, okay. All righty. So we're back.
Sorry, Chair.
We are back from recess. Back in the CBAC meeting, we are at the part of the agenda where we will begin public comment and correspondence, starting with Peter Kent. Mr. Kent, if you can please state your name and address in the microphone for the record.
Peter Kent, 8 Academy Way, St. Petersburg. And thank you for, again, listening to my ideas on how to maximize the community benefits from the sale of the historic gas plant site. The Ray Hines proposal seems to be costing the city $1.6 billion over 30 years, while guaranteeing only 5% of that money, $80 million, as community benefits. What a terrible return on investment. I urge you to reject their impact report as inadequate. Several recent surveys have shown that the public is 4-1 against against approving this current project. Several of the city council members have asked me to propose how the city might get a better benefit deal for its residents. I got 6 steps. Number 1, the raised current contract gives them half the profits from any sale of the 86 acres until the end of the 2027 season. The city has little negotiating power until then, so they should vote the deal down. Then they should, then the city develop the Booker Creek into a beautiful linear city park with walkways and benches. I have read the 116-page land appraisal that was the city got. It is based on 8 parcels. 5 of them are not even in the state of Florida, and none of them are in St. Petersburg. How do you do an appraisal where none of the parcels are in the city you're talking about? The city drafts an RFP for the developers to purchase this is my next idea, is the city would draft a new RFP for developers to purchase the remaining 86-acre parcel at the end of the 2027 season. The developers would be subject to the normal building requirements, including infrastructure, affordable housing, green spaces, leads requirements, all of those things. The developer can then either offer to buy the whole parcel for about $800 million, which is what we think it's really worth, or they can buy a parcel at a time. But they purchase a parcel at a time, then the city acts as a developer, installing the infrastructure and selling the parcels to any builder at the highest market price. The key for the CPHC community benefit analysis is from these land profits, the city could establish a $50 million community benefit trust, a $250 million affordable housing trust that many more qualified residents could buy and fix up homes citywide, not just in the area, citywide, and provide much more work to local contractors, including minorities, MBEs, SBEs. The rest of the land profits could go for necessary upgrades to the existing roads, water, sewer, and stormwater system. It would provide many times the raised community benefits. Thank you. Yes.
Can I ask you a question? So, Mr. Kent, you're proposing dividing it up and letting other developers come in and buy different parcels? Is that what one of your proposals?
Either way, it go out as an RFP and a developer could come and buy the whole 86 acres up front, pay for it up front the way a normal development works. Or alternately, they could buy a parcel at a time and the city would act as the developer.
So do you think that that would fulfill the goal of recreating a community, a cohesive community, if we do that? Because then we're not going to get the parks or the music hall or the museum.
Well, you get the same amount of green space as required anywhere in the city. The city has regulations as to zoning regulations as to how much green space in parks has to be included. I included the park along Booker Creek as a standalone park built by the city. So that would be maybe 10, 15 acres. And what was the other?
But who's going to pay for that 10 or 15 acres of parkland?
I'm sorry.
Who is paying for that 10 or 15 acres?
Well, the city, it's the city's land. So the cost to the city would be to, beautify it and turn it into a beautiful park, the same as it would be in any other city park. But the city would be paying for that park. Yes.
Okay, I'm just curious.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else? Thanks.
Next up, we have Lee Allen. Lee Allen?
Oh, I know he had to go.
He did have to go. All right. So Mr. Allen did not vote for or against. He did make notes. However, more money, public transit, bike lanes. Next up, we have Thomas Hallinan. Hallinan. Okay. If you please state your full name and address in the mic for public record.
Thomas Hallinan, 530 12th Avenue North. Several years ago, City Forum solicited public input regarding the future of the Ray Stadium and Historic Gas Plant District. Of the 8 people at my table, not one supported using public funds to subsidize a new Ray Stadium. I believe that this sentiment represents a vast majority of the local population and voters. The city should allow the current sweetheart deal with the Rays to expire. This would give the city an unfettered ability to redevelop the entire site and maximize the cost-benefit ratio. Instead, the city is about to engage in a new sweetheart deal, spending billions of dollars of public funds to subsidize the hobby of a billionaire. There are many reasons why such a giveaway is ill-conceived. One, morally wrong. Giving billions of dollars in cash and subsidies to a billionaire for their private business is morally wrong. End of case. Two, fiscally irresponsible. Many studies have shown that sports stadiums do not pay for themselves or deliver the touted benefits. City council members cited these studies at the October 26th presentation. The response? Our project will be different. Yeah. Three, unilateral decision by Mayor Welch. Mayor Welch seems determined to keep the Rays here no matter the cost. There were previous offers to develop the area without a stadium, but the mayor nixed those options. Four, obfuscation of costs. When all the cash payments, interest costs, tax subsidies, and other costs are added up, the real cost is over $2 billion of public funds. This exceeds the $600 million often cited by proponents. Five, a done deal. The proponents are presenting the Rays proposal as a must-pass rush job, as a done deal. For such a huge public subsidy, every council member and every commission member here should start out with the mindset of no for their vote. Six, easiest money ever. Think of it. You only need to sway 5 council members to vote yes. You get billions of dollars for your effort. The easiest money ever not earned. 7, alternatives. Is billions of dollars for a stadium more important than affordable housing or infrastructure repairs? 8, conflating benefits. Proponents of the deal disingenuously attribute the benefits of the entire site redevelopment to the building of a new stadium. No, without a baseball stadium, the benefits would remain. Plus, there would be more land available for other purposes, tax-paying purposes, not tax-free usage. I call upon all St. Petersburg City Council members, Pinellas County Commissioners, and the public to stand up against this proposed massive giveaway and vote no. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Next up, we have Frank Cirillo. You state your name and address.
Frank Cirillo, 1400 Gandy Boulevard North, Unit 406, St. Petersburg, Florida, 33702. Excuse my French. I'm going to start out with a quote. There's lies, damn lies, and statistics. I feel like I can say this because I'm an economist by training. Everything that we've talked about here in the community benefits agreement can just be done by the city council. This is a community benefits agreement. The Rays are a private corporation, and we're supposed to be getting more or equal to the value that we're providing them in return for what they're providing us. And a lot of what I've been hearing is not just meeting that mark. I firmly believe everybody here knows how to look through proposals and knows what's good for the city. And at the end of the day, I feel like what this is becoming is more of a political question than it is a question of economics. That being said, there are a lot of people in this community who are opposed to this. And if you know anything about survivorship bias, it's basically the scientific idea that the people that are harmed by something aren't able to show up or come to the table because they were harmed by the initial thing. So a lot of the working class can't be here tonight because they've worked 2 or 3 jobs and they can't have the luxury to come talk to you guys. There's a lot of people here who still come even though they do work 2 or 3 jobs just because they know this doesn't benefit them or the community. Beyond that, it's very interesting to see that when you go back, because all these meetings are public record, everybody that for the most part speaks in favor of this deal has some sort of financial interest to gain. You can go on the property appraiser's website, look up who people work for through LinkedIn and various other methods, and it's very clear that the people who want this to go through benefit some way politically, monetarily, or some other way from this deal. And not a lot of people are actually in favor of it that are just average citizens that aren't engaged in the political process. Tonight we talked a lot about the housing market and the affordable housing. I'd really appreciate it if the body came back to the next meeting and upped those numbers even more than the requested proposal, because we're in a commercial housing recession right now. There's a lot of talk that in 5 years after the pandemic, a lot of these commercial lenders are renegotiating their commercial deals, and we're going to be in a hard place. And Most of the people that I know that are my age that have moved here to this city work remotely. If in an office at all, it's at a barista's or a coffee's office. It's not in an actual white collar office space, and they don't want to work in an office. We like working from home, so we need housing in order to be able to work from home. Beyond that point, since the Great Recession, new homes developing have not come back to their pre-recession levels. So every single year since 2007, the state of Florida has not met that new housing supply. So it's kind of laughable to think that there isn't a demand for housing. Like there is a pent up demand for housing for residential use. Why would the Hines Rays be working with the city on penalties? I get a little chuckle when I hear the city talk about that. So sorry. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Next up, we have Roger Curlin. Mr. Curlin, please state your name and address in the mic for the record.
Yes, Roger Curlin, 4535 6th Avenue North here in St. Petersburg, 33713. So, dear Advisory Council, thank you so much for having the opportunity to hear from the public. I am the Executive Director of the Edge Business District Association. The association and the board has unanimously submitted a letter of support for this project. The Edge District, for those that aren't familiar, we have 125 businesses and thousands of residents in a very, very dense district, and we employ thousands of people there. During the next 3 years, we have $500 million with a B in developments just inside the Edge District. That's not the gas plant district. That's going to double our number of residents, double our number of businesses, double our number of employees, hopefully double our number of visitors. And with the parking garage at Orange Station, double our public parking that we have in that district. The council has been privy to all of the statistics of this project. And I want to kind of talk about quickly the story of today and the story of tomorrow. So the story of today at the gas plant district is we have one building and a very, very large parking lot. That's a very one-dimensional business for the surrounding areas and the surrounding neighborhoods. But I look to the future in this project and I see housing, I see a convention space, I see a museum, I see office space, I see retail options, I see green space, I see community gatherings, jobs, education, arts, and more. And those parking garages are a much better designed use of parking and not just this great flat surface. So allows all these other great businesses there. The synergy that can provide to the Edge is going to be powerful. This weekend on one night, the WWE was in town. We had close to 50,000 people. It generated millions of dollars to our area. I had 3 of my businesses in the Edge said they had their best business day ever. These are little small businesses that are just struggling to survive. And from one event, they were able to have their best day ever. Think about that space being activated 365 days a year with the wealth of different things that are going to go on in that district and how that can affect our area and connect our city. So in closing, we support this as the Edge Business District Association, and I'm here to answer any questions you may have of us as an association.
Well done. Okay, thank you so much. Next up, we have Jamie Solak. All righty. Jamie Solak has voted yes for this project. Next up, we have Robin Davidoff.
Hi, good evening. It's been a long night, so I'm going to go quickly. I'm Robin David of 4830 Osprey Drive South, and I'm here tonight to represent the League of Women Voters of St. Petersburg. I wanted to make a few points about the benefits. First, there was a lot of talk tonight about new real estate taxes, and that is true. There will be a great deal of new real estate taxes. But I think you have to understand and concern yourselves the fact that $700 million of those property taxes are going to be diverted to pay for the stadium. So we need to make that financial adjustment to make it a fair analysis, we think. Secondly, the $50 million benefit amount, first of all, if we understand that if you make a payment over a number of years, the amount that you pay is worth less. And if you pay out $50 million, like we heard tonight, over 30 years, the value is $31 million, not $50 million. Secondly, we're concerned about the housing, and there's a lot of talk about our priorities to housing. Here's our concern with housing. First of all, there's a buyout provision. The developers we've talked to have said that for $30 million, any developer would not build that housing because it's not economical. It's cheaper to buy out than to build it. The second is the opt-out provision, which says that if they can't get grants or loans, they don't have to build any of this housing. That is a concern of ours because we agree that housing should be a priority, and 1,200 is not that many housing compared to what our needs are. So we ask you to consider that. There's a study that was done earlier by the city, and it stated that 80% of AMI and below would be the housing requirement. And I didn't make a copy of that for you, but I will send it to you. And I last want to mention ownership of housing. The developer has announced that all of the housing on the property will be rental housing. And you know, we've talked for years about creating generational wealth. And the two ways to create generational wealth is to either lower the cost of property taxes, so somebody's monthly payment can go to mortgage, or lower the cost of the housing. But this project, by taking $700 million and putting it into a stadium, creates a hole. And this is, economists call it the tax increment financing hole. And what that means is that we have to fill that hole in order to make the services equal. So this project is not going to lower property taxes. It's going to increase property taxes by that TIF amount at least. And if we're not going to be helping people pay for a mortgage by not selling a home but renting it, we don't see how we're creating generational wealth. I hope you can see it and can tell us because we can't see that. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Next up, we have Donna Peltier. Ms. Peltier, please state your name and address in the mic for the record, please.
Yes, Donna Peltier, 4801 Osprey Drive South, apartment 205, St. Petersburg, 33711. As a resident of St. Petersburg, I am very concerned about elements of the Ray Hines plan for the new stadium and the development of the gas plant district. Taxpayers would be burdened with a huge share of the cost of the new stadium for the Rays, a for-profit organization, which would lease the 22-acre stadium site from the city at no cost. In addition, the city would sell the 64 acres of the adjacent gas plant district to the Rays at well below market rates for a multi-use private development. The plan includes no provision for the city to share in the revenues that the Rays would collect over time, as well as exempt the team from paying property taxes on the stadium site. This lopsided deal is bad for St. Petersburg. Taxpayer funds would be better spent on projects to improve city infrastructure and public services. That's why I urge CBAC to reject this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have William Kilgore. Please state your name and address for the record.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Name's William Kilgore, and I reside in the Ponce de Leon neighborhood, an organizer with the St. Pete Tenants Union here. Yeah, I just want to begin. Thank you all. So next week's meeting, I appreciate the motion whenever last week to have another meeting, and we need to have public comment before a vote at next week's meeting. I hope that happens. I wouldn't see why it wouldn't, because yeah, it's clear this process, honestly, it needs more time. You know, I think after tonight, I mean, look at here, we're here at 8:30 going on 9. I mean, these meetings, and I want to thank Councilmember Whitney for the motion with the housing. That's really important. All these other things. it's important because it's clear this process needs more time. There's a lot of questions, a lot of unresolved things, and this is a chance for the community to speak up. But when I was hearing this stuff earlier about the comparison between office spaces and like housing for low income people, I mean, I honestly, I'm personally offended by that. I've never made more than $30,000 in a year in my working life, my adult working life. When we're talking about how like office space or hotels is a appropriate trade-off. What about the hotel maids? What about the desk staff, the custodial staff? The retailers, the retail workers who are underpaid. We just know it. We know we're underpaid. These are important jobs. I work as a gig worker. It's an important job. I enjoy what I do. I'm proud of what I do. And it's not just about creating some new opportunity for everything. We have to do that. And this is a whole thing because the city says, oh, well, we can't solve this by building units. Well, no, the city can spend all this money on a new stadium, and they can absolutely do something like this. They can establish a public housing enterprise and all of that. But the thing is, too, Raise Hines themselves, these big investors for Raise Hines, they have enough wealth, they could solve homelessness like overnight with the amount of wealth, and still be super rich. Absolutely. But see, they don't, because charity doesn't work. It doesn't work when things are going through the private sector. These public-private partnerships, they don't work. It's got to come straight from the public sector. And that's what this is. And we're dumping all this money from the public sector into a stadium for a $1 billion+ sports franchise. I find that really egregious. We don't need benefits 30 years down the road. We need more housing now. We need more grocery stores in food deserts now. We need these things now, not 30 years from now, and with this trickle-down economic scheme. So I wanted to just bring that to your attention, and appreciate it. Hope to see you all here next week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up, we have James Tremarco.
Hey, everybody.
Hello. Please state your name and address in the microphone for the record.
My name is James Trimarco. I live at 809 18th Avenue North. Thanks for being here. It's been a long night. I appreciate everybody's time. I appreciate that St. Petersburg has this process. Most Florida towns do not have it. Really glad that it exists and that we're going through the details of this project. So don't you guys wonder where the Hines Raised people are? I've been to a lot of these now. And, like CBAC processes, the community conversations, they're a sports team. They must have fans, but I almost never see them. Every time I come to this, it's like many people speaking out against this because of all of the reasons everybody just said. And it's just as interesting that they don't really seem to have local people. It's puzzling. I mean, I think it suggests that the majority of the population opposes this project. And if we were to do a referendum like Councilmember Floyd proposed like a month or two ago, I think that's what it would show. I want to focus on my main issue with this deal, which is that the community benefits tend to be kind of contingent and or unclear. I'm going to read something from the term sheet. It's section F. It says Hines Raised will prioritize efforts subject to market conditions to include the following in early phases of the project: grocery store, childcare, daycare, preschool, and similar uses of the property, a library or incubator space. But the key thing is subject to market conditions, because it means we might get the things that the community desperately needs, but only if the market permits. Otherwise, we won't get them. I think I would like to see a very different approach to this land. I'm sure you guys are all aware that this is the largest downtown parcel on the east coast of the United States. It is a space of incredible potential that we must not squander. And I don't want to see us sign onto something where we might get what we need, but also might not. I'd like to see the city have more agency over the development of this parcel. And for example, sell some sections to a developer, take the money from that and develop like city, like more city controlled projects on the rest of it. I urge the CBAC to carefully consider Ruth Whitney's resolutions today. I do believe they improve this deal, but I continue to ask that the members of this body vote not to suggest approval of the project.
Thank you. Next up, we have Tatiana Haverkamp. Please state your name and address in the microphone for the record, please.
Hi, hello. My name is Tatiana Haverkamp. My address is 871 64th Avenue South, right off of MLK. Nice to see you all. I'm here speaking on behalf of Bay Area Dream Defenders tonight. We are a Black-led, multiracial youth civil rights organization. Over the course of this year and last year, our campaign is called Save Our Streets. We're organizing around gun violence, particularly starting in trying to get more resources to go to Child's Park Rec Center. However, we recognize that gun violence has also been a huge thing surrounding Campbell Park, which is an area that's impacted by this redevelopment plan. And the thing that we're really trying to organize around is just getting our communities more access to resources. That's especially youth programs. That's especially, development programs for teenagers and young adults, giving people opportunity, addressing the housing issue. And with all of that in mind, looking over the agreement as it currently exists, we would like to urge the committee to vote no on the agreement as currently proposed. We think this sort of thing really can't be rushed. And at this stage, we should fight for getting more out of Ray's Hines. Saying no right now is really just holding on to our leverage, trying to get the best deal for the people of St. Pete. There could be a better agreement a little bit down the line. We've also signed on to a letter that was sent in by Faith in Florida, should have been delivered by Dylan Danes, who is not here tonight, but we'd like to co-sign the concerns that Faith in Florida has already brought up in their letter. And I want to second what committee member Neeson has said about the push to try and get all of this affordable housing to 80% AMI or lower. It's really going to be more accessible. And I think a lot of us in the audience have a little bit of pushback to the comments that were made about office space. I think prioritizing offices over housing just gives us empty offices. Office space does not boost the economy as significantly as I think might have been estimated here, particularly in the post-COVID era where there's a lot more people working from home. And I'd also like to compliment Committee Member Campbell for expressing her concern today for our returning citizens. That was heard and it was appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Madison Rice.
Hi.
All right, if you could state your name and address in the microphone for the record, please.
Madison Rice, 3245 Jackson Street North. Yeah, screw MLB. Let's just have WWE in the gas plant all the time. So Atlanta was in a similar situation to us not too long ago. And I think it's a good idea to look at how their subsidized stadium and development has gone since starting. And economists analyzed the stadium's economic impact and came up with the following. Approximately 1/3 of the project sales derived from crowding out other local economic activity. In total, added tax collections fall well short of covering the public subsidies that fund the stadium. So Truist Stadium actually costs taxpayers millions a year, while the Braves make tens of millions a year that does not get shared with the city. On another note, I think it's great that you guys voted to have an additional meeting. I really appreciate your dedication to learning about this project and trying to get us a good deal, but I think this process is a little flawed. In my opinion, I think that we should be including the subsidy and the development of the stadium in our assessment, because the development isn't happening without the stadium and the city is funding both things. And as a citizen of the city, what the stadium and development are telling me is that the city has money to throw around. We must be stacked. Hundreds of millions of tax dollars are available for us to work with. And the economic impact study that we had done doesn't even look at alternatives to a stadium or other developers or a scenario where the city keeps the land. We have no idea if this option is a good one because we haven't looked at anything else. And I know it's taboo, but our previous administration had an entire RFP process for developments with or without a stadium. It's possible for us to do something else. All I'm hearing from Raise Hines is if you ask for too much, we're going to take something away. Does that feel like a good public-private partnership to you? If Raise Hines doesn't want to put enough affordable housing downtown, if they can't make a profit off of it, then maybe the site isn't the right fit for them. If the city is going to fund this project and give away the land, we better make sure that we're giving citizens what's best for them. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Sierra Clark. All right. Oh, okay. Sierra, if you could state your name and address in the microphone for the record, please.
Joyful Day, Beautiful Beings. My name is Sierra Clark. My previous address was 4544 22nd Avenue South, St. Petersburg, Florida, 33711. I moved out of my apartment to move in with my parents. Shortly after Dad died, Mom got evicted. We have a family property, but it's a lot to do in the midst of the part I think that we're missing. And I think Ms. Gwen spoke a little bit about it, and that was like the spirit of community. But it's spirits that fills these businesses. It's spirits that people, right, is individuals that that we're gonna hire to work, to build a thing. I've been working since I've been 14, and yet still, me and my mom still found a way to be homeless. And not because I didn't work, not because my parents weren't taxpayers, not because I wasn't a taxpayer, and not because I don't do my part in the community, because I think the excessive building of exterior things, that's forgetting about the important thing. And that's the humanity and the people. It's the people that makes builders want to build here in St. Pete. And yet I can't afford to live here in St. Pete. Mind you, I'm born and raised snotty nose, barefoot St. Pete. This is all I know. And I'm a little scared to think that my current near future, this might not be all I'm gonna know. And Dad passed away. And I found him in a position, right, that I know that a person only cared about money. Because there's no way that a person who cares about life and humanity and the interior parts, because it's the interior parts of these structures that are going to be, that we are the people our loved ones are going to work in, right? The ones who we got to re-implement, who've done time, now they get to work again, not feel loved, not feel appreciated, not feel like anything is willing to be done. I heard 10 months, 18 months, and me and my mom still looking for housing after a whole 12 months. So I think more time could be brought on this attention, because this isn't just some ordinary thing. I know we do great things here in City Hall because I watched them been done. But I just think that this is our time to do something completely different. This isn't just for today, this is for tomorrow. I've worked 22 years in healthcare. I worked 17 years at our local children's hospital. And I currently had to leave my career because I don't feel care in my community and the decisions that are being made because now we got to rush to do a thing.
Thank you so much.
We are the change. It starts with us, it ends with us, and it continues with us. And today, we can make a change. I vote no against it.
So that is it for public comment.
That's correct.
Next up on the agenda is new business. Ms. Rick, did you want us to touch base on?
Oh, didn't we say we're gonna put that on the agenda for, we can
Yes.
bring it up next time?
All right, fantastic.
Do you want to?
We are adjourning at 8:49.